What's the date? G'day. Today, what's the date?
It's May 18th.
What a start. Today's May 18th, 2022. Today is a special edition of The Pipeline from the Western Standard here. I'm Western Standard publisher Derek Fildebrandt. We're going to be covering the historic leadership review vote of United Conservative Party leader Jason Kenney. I'm joined today, as usual, by the always pleasant Dave Naylor. How are you doing, Dave?
I'm doing well, even though you've messed up the feng shui.
That was the producer's fault.
Yes.
And
he writes one column for us. Now he thinks he can shuffle everything around.
He's playing God around here. Also, speaking of playing God, joining us is Western Standard Opinion and Broadcast Editor Corey Morgan. How are you feeling, Corey?
Good. It's nice going into something when I honestly, something rare you hear to me, I haven't a clue how this is going to turn out.
Well, that's the thing. Everyone's got their bets. Well, we've got a great program. Just a few housekeeping notes. First, we want to thank one of our great sponsors, Bitcoin Well. Bitcoin Well is a founding sponsor of the Western Standard and our broadcast programs. Bitcoin Well is an Alberta-based company that provides, they've got ATMs right across Western Canada. So you can convert cash into Bitcoin, Bitcoin into cash. We've got fantastic programs like the Bitcoin Wells employee savings program. We've got that at the Western Standard where 2% of what our employees are paid here is in Bitcoin, and then the Western Standard matches another 2% on top of that to incentivize savings in a currency that is much over long term much more stable than something like the Canadian dollar as it continues to be devalued. So you should check them out, bitcoinwell.com. Fantastic Alberta-based company that is making Bitcoin and different Bitcoin products accessible to regular people like you and small businesses. We also want to thank our Western Standard members. Without you, we couldn't do what we do. If you're not yet a member of the Western Standard, go to westernstandard.news and click on membership. For just $10 a month or $99 a year, you get unlimited access to all Western Standard content. And you'll be supporting independent, bailout-free, independent of government Western media and the huge and growing team of journalists we've got here right across the West and on Parliament Hill. Okay, let's get started with the good stuff. We've got a long lineup of, we got a lot of really good guests and experts coming in today, both before we get the results and after. Dave, first, tell us what we can expect tonight in terms of the timeline. Ballots are being counted now. When do we expect results?
Anytime between 4 o'clock and 6 o'clock. Now, unfortunately, the UCP doesn't have a very good track record of doing things on time, but there's a Flames game tonight, so we're hoping they've got their fast counting fingers. So the safe betting is if it's a Kenney victory, it'll be early announced so everybody can get to the hockey game, and if it's a Kenney loss, it'll be closer to 6.
I think that's a fair bet. But yeah, it's being overseen by Deloitte right now. Deloitte will give the party the results, but then the party determines, I think, when the results are going to come. We're going to have Western Standard's Alberta Legislative Bureau Chief Rachel Emanuel. She's going to be one of very few journalists who are going to be at the Kenney announcement event where he will give a speech one way or another. Rachel wrote in her piece today, she was the only Alberta journalist who followed Jason Kenney down to Washington, D.C. for his appearance before the Senate committee. She wrote today that he said he's having 2 speeches written, depending on which way it goes. Yes, stay or go. And she's going to be one of the very few select journalists in the Alberta media who's going to be there tonight. We've also got a long lineup though of experts and commentators in Alberta politics. Tell us about who we've got coming on the show, Corey.
Sure. I got to look at the list though to make sure I get them in the right order. We should have Andrew Lawton coming in to join us. He's with True North Centre, but he's of course always been well tuned and dialed into Canadian politics in general and as well as Alberta one, so he'll offer some perspectives on that. And then Janet Brown, who has Janet Brown opinion polling and marketing and such, and she's been a regular commentator on a number of news outlets, so she's going to discuss things. Then Danielle Smith's going to pop into the studio. If anybody knows about leadership challenges, it's certainly Danielle, and she will lend some thoughts there. Later on, Paul Hinman's going to join us. I noticed one of the commenters was saying they want to hear from Paul. Well, you will get to hear from him tonight. Peter Guthrie, he's been an outspoken UCP MLA up in Cochrane area. He's going to come on for a little while to talk to us. Josh Andrus with it's not
Project Confederation.
Project Confederation. I was going to say Project Alberta, but that's not the case. So many projects on the go. Drew Barnes, of course, he'll have to lend his few cents on this. He always likes to talk about these things. And David Parker will come in from the
Take Back Alberta.
Take Back Alberta. Boy, how do I keep track of all of these? So yes, we got lots of people. Plus, we might have others pop in throughout the course of the night. And the schedule is going to be fluid because we don't know at what point when suddenly we're going to break away and they're going to be releasing the results. They've given us a 2-hour window to work with.
Yeah, just some programming note for our producer here. Let's get up on the screen instead of SGM. No one knows what an SGM is. Let's just make sure people know that this is Kenney leadership review votes expected. Okay, so 4 o'clock is the very earliest. That's 8 minutes from now. The earliest that we can expect any results. I'm not sure.
No, I wouldn't mortgage the house on it.
No, I wouldn't bet on it.
I mean, the other thing is that this is going to be also a commercial for the UCP, right? That they're going to want to promote. I'm sure they're going to run a few infomercials and stuff like that. So this is a chance, for them to get some free advertising.
Yeah. Well, actually, we're going to have a live stream of the event. So just a note for broadcast here. Once we've got the live stream of the UCP going, we'll just get that running off in the corner, even if there's nothing happening. We'll just make sure that way we're able to watch it in real time. No, nothing yet. But we're waiting on it. Okay, well, I guess the first order of business is we need to place our bets, gentlemen. We've been making our guesses here and there. No ranges. Give a number. You have to give an actual number. About what do you think Kenney is going to get? Unlikely any of us is going to be exactly right. The big one is if you pick he wins or loses, and by big or by small. So we're going to have pie on our face. I fully expect there's a strong chance I'll have egg on my face today. But I'm saying 45. Dave?
55.
I'm kind of splitting the difference at 48.
Actually, 48 was my actual one beforehand, but I said 45 here, so I'm gonna stick with it.
As I said, though, I really don't have a clue. Nothing.
No.
This is a totally uninformed guess.
Well, I mean, if this was going by the special general meeting in Red Deer that was supposed to take place originally, based on the information I had, I would have said Kenney would have struggled to stay above 30%. It was not even going to be close. It was going to be a blowout, and that's why they changed the rules. They knew that this was going very sideways for the premier. They changed the rules. There's been a lot of, let's just say, questionable membership sales, mass membership purchases made on single credit cards, largely in different ethnic communities where kind of bulk membership buying is kind of a long-standing practice in all parties. It's, not.
So whatever the number is, nobody's going to believe it. Bottom of the line.
Well, no one's going to believe it's correctly as high as it is. I mean, if it's 45, well, then it probably should have been 35. But at that point, the difference is moot. He's gone.
Yeah.
It makes a difference if it's 50% plus one or more, because then the lack of confidence many people have in the process. I think there is good reason to have faith, faith in the counting here. They've got Deloitte doing it.
Yeah.
From all accounts, from the conversations I've had, Deloitte has been very tough, very fair. Deloitte is a respected accounting firm. Their reputation's on the line, so they don't want, at least the part that they're in charge of, the counting and part of the process, the balloting, to be called into question. All of the question, Dave, maybe you should run us through some of the controversies that we've had so far around the process.
Our Linda Slobodian wrote a column last week talking to Rick Orman, who's basically running the party for the UCP. And he says, look, I have every confidence in the integrity of the vote from Deloitte. But he admitted, and there is a big but, the integrity of it, the vote until it gets to Deloitte. And that's where the alleged shenanigans have taken place. It's alleged Jason Kenney appeared at a Edmonton mosque and was urging people to sign up and basically saying, don't worry about the $10. There's allegations allegedly under investigation right now by Elections Alberta on bulk membership buying that you mentioned, Derek, in ethnic communities by thousands of memberships, just a small number of credit cards, which would be a little bit naughty, as they say. And just the changing of the vote from from in-person to, all that sort of indecision over a few days. It was going to be held in Calgary and Edmonton at the same time, and then Red Deer, and then they decide mail-in. The process is flawed. The process has undone itself basically, and people have some good reason not to trust it, especially after Kenny's still under investigation for the 2017 leadership election, and that was 5 years ago. So there's always going to be questions when it comes to Premier Kenney, unfortunately.
Sylvia, just so you know, we're reading some of the comments, the ones we see. We're busy. We're watching a lot of things, computers, results, all sorts of stuff.
It is interactive, though. I mean, I like seeing discussion even between you guys. Some's less tasteful than others, I guess. But and throw questions our way. We might catch stuff and pass it along. By all means, use the comment scroll, but we can't necessarily address everyone as they come in.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about some of the scenarios. One of the very possible scenarios is a slim majority vote for Kenney. I mean, I've never heard of any leader surviving in the 50s. Even the 60s, leaders normally go either right away or they're gone, taken out by their own caucus or something. A few within weeks or months after. But just for the sake of argument here, let's say 55%. If Kenney gets 55% tonight, which is what Dave was predicting. How do you think it plays out?
I think it'll be terrible. He's got a lot of unity issues within caucus already. He needs something decisive. He needs us to be dead wrong. He needs something well over 60, because he's got to have a mandate to say, look, the members have spoken. We need to go forward, because there's clearly a lot of discontent down there. And the only thing he can chasten them with is saying the members have spoken. And 55 is not saying they've spoken. So it's going to be just tumultuous. We will see more floor crossings going on. I mean, it's going to be a mess. So he's going to have to get something strong, I really feel.
So we've got a question for Corey here from Dan asking what time we can expect the final numbers.
I wish we knew. They've given us a window of between 4 and 6. Mm-hmm. And as we know, too, with the UCP, everything seems to be later than when they tell us. But, I mean, we're coming up on a hockey game. Hopefully they respect Albertans enough to just get the thing out when they got it.
If they have any respect for Albertans, they will not make anyone miss any of the game. Dave, has the UCP ever started anything ever on time?
Well, no. No. And especially Jason Kenney is the worst offender. I mean, you can see the media commenting, Kenney 20 minutes late now. I guess his time's more important than mine. So yeah, they have a very bad history of getting things right on time. Okay.
Well, maybe Corey, I'm going to sub out here in a minute here, but maybe we'll just get you talking. Maybe set up some of the scenarios. If Kenney goes down tonight, he gets less than 50%. Maybe run us through what do you think we can expect? What's the process? And who are we likely to see run?
Well, the unofficial leadership race will begin within minutes. We know that. So I mean, people are going to put their names forward. We've had a couple of people that showed interest, assuming the job's open. As with Danielle Smith, who said, if the job opens, she certainly strongly consider running for it. We've got Brian Jean, who's made it very clear he wants to not only run for it, but to make sure the job is open, and doing everything he can to make sure that Premier Kenney is no longer the premier, so that he can make a go of it. So there's a couple of the scenarios, and we might have some names that we hadn't anticipated popping up. It's hard to say, but nobody's shown real interest in the job quite yet. The jockeying is going to happen fast. I mean, the party will have to scramble and find an interim leader. That'll have to be somebody who's definitely not going to run for the leadership. So there's a few names, I guess, in cabinet that wouldn't be considered prime contenders for that role.
No, like a Dave Hancock when last time this happened.
Yeah, exactly. Somebody solid and steady, but who doesn't have ambitions to try and take the leadership themselves. So I mean, they're going that. I don't know how fast they can pivot. Then you've got to set up a committee for the leadership. You've got to set about what the rules are going to be for running for leadership moving forward from there. And they can't do a long one. They can't do like the federal Conservatives, because they got a general election a year from now.
But in theory, we could have the leadership race underway unofficially tomorrow morning.
Oh yeah, the unofficial will be beginning.
And the UCP caucus is meeting in Calgary tomorrow at 11 o'clock. And that's going to be fun to be a fly on the wall. Maybe we'll have an episode of Twitter leaks or WikiLeaks or whatever Derek called it
So-
back then. But yeah, so Kenney either goes in there and lays down the law and says, I've won. If you can't support me, get out now. Or he uses it to resign. So either way, a couple of historic days ahead, Corey, for us in Alberta politics.
Yeah, well, and Kenney's had, some strong language saying this is the last, we have to settle it after this. So he's not going to tolerate any more dissent, anything going further at this point. He hasn't said what he would do, but I imagine the only penalty left is expulsion from caucus. He can't sit and like right now, we have a number of MLAs who are very outspoken against the leader, and he can't afford to kick them out of caucus at this point. He already lost 2 because of that. But can he maintain these guys in caucus now after the race, even with a strong showing? What do you do with people like Peter Guthrie or Jason Steffen, who have been very outspoken and questioning his leadership, and keep them within the caucus with you? It's going to be uncomfortable to say the least.
We're going to be able to ask Peter tonight, okay, Peter, here's the results. What are you going to do? And, could be breaking news on that one right then and there.
Yeah, well, we will have Peter at 5 o'clock. So we'll ask where assuming we've got results at that point. So
now just to let you know, on the results page, they have taken down the stream not available, and they have put up a black screen. So we've made tremendous progress since 4 o'clock.
Something's moving behind the scenes there. Something else to keep in mind is the other parties. We'll be talking to Paul Hinman. Might he see this as an opportunity to build the Wildrose Independence Party and turn it into the alternative he wants it to be? If people are frustrated, turning away from the UCP, they've been hanging on this long, I'm certain Paul's going to want to say, hey, I've got a home for you. As to how many of them he harvests and brings in, it's hard to say. They're different mandates, they're different parties. There's also, what do you need? I think 4 seats in the legislature with MLAs, and you've got official party status. There's already 2 malcontents sitting over there with Drew and Todd. We might end up with at least 2 more after this. There's so many variables right now. Of course, the first step, though, is just finding out what the numbers are on this thing.
And look, we've got our first unexpected surprise guest.
Surprise!
Hey, we have Melanie Risdon from the newsroom, man. Yes. How's it going, Mel?
Good, thank you. Yeah.
Looks like a bit deer between the headlights or deer in the headlights.
Well,
you probably
a little
didn't what Dirk just said, get in there type thing?
Yeah, let people know what your thoughts are, what your predictions are. So here I am to chat with you guys.
Well, we've already made our predictions. I was the only one to predict he would survive with 55%. I think Derek picked 45 and Corey 48.
Yeah.
So
what are your thoughts?
Okay, so you guys are going under the 50%.
Yes.
Except me.
Interesting. I think I would likely peg him over your percentage in support.
Why?
I think that he has, for lack of a better way of explaining it, I think he's had a lot of things well under control.
Okay.
He has seemed very confident.
I think,
he was down in Washington the day before results were announced, and was confident down there when he was talking with our Rachel Emmanuel. He says he's sleeping at night, so doesn't appear to be a man who's afraid of losing his job.
Well, and credit where it's due. He didn't, at least set aside the business of the office while this was all going on. It didn't do him any favors being, as far as leadership goes, being in Washington for this last week, but it was actually a very good meeting. It went well. He promoted Alberta and our energy products far better in that meeting than our federal government has since they've been taking government probably. So, credit where due and appreciated. It's just it's unfortunate he wasn't as effective 2 years ago. He might not be facing a review today.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. I think even just some of the traction he's got for promoting employment and promoting business to come to Alberta, I think has been, I think it has been affecting people's thoughts about how productive he has been. I think that it is perhaps affecting people's view on whether he can help lift our province out of a pandemic crisis, whether we're looking at it financially, from the health sector. So I think a lot of the positioning that he's done over the last couple of months now, I think have worked in his favor.
Okay, we're going to pull Andrew Lawton in. He's down in the lobby. That's what was being whispered. The screen wasn't open well enough, so he's been back there because we've been looking forward to getting another perspective from somebody who's a strong political watcher and voice, but is outside of our little cloistered Alberta world. So thanks for joining us, Andrew.
Hey, I know that nothing more than Easterners' opinions are what Albertans want. So thanks very much for having me on.
Oh, it's always appreciated. You've spent more than your share of time out here so far. I don't imagine this is making a lot of news outside of the political wonks out east, though.
I wouldn't say generally. I mean, certainly the Ottawa journalist class is talking about it because of its effect on the more broad conservative movement. But I also think, generally speaking, with the conservative leadership race going, that's where most of the horse race attention is devoted. But I will say that there is a lot of soul searching right now in the conservative movement because of the leadership race, the convoy, the ousting of Aaron O'Toole. And I think a lot of that will really consume whatever happens tonight as part of that bigger narrative. And I think in a lot of cases, it might be a lot broader. I mean, I talked to Jason Kenney a couple of weeks back, and he had said that, the opposition to him is just about COVID. And that was really it. He tried to narrow it down to a very single issue. And I'm not sure that captures the complexity of a lot of the discontent around his leadership.
No, and I have spoken to some frustrated individuals who said that they have a broader concerns with Premier Kenney and things over the last few years, or the Fair Deal panel and a number of things, and they feel kind of insulted actually when they're being accused of just being vaccine, opponents or part of the truckers convoy, and Premier Kenney's taken that tact. I'm not sure if that's going to help him in this particular kind of race, because this is an internal race.
Yeah, and generally speaking, there's been frustration about the leadership style, and I think that goes far beyond policy. People that don't feel like they have a voice in caucus. And I mean, obviously, compared to, say, Ontario, my province, there's a lot more discontent allowed in the UCP caucus, and I think that's just part of the Alberta spirit, where there's a little bit less unanimity behind the leader. But I think even then, that there's not enough latitude that a lot of MLAs I've spoken to over the last couple of years have said they feel under Kenney's leadership. And I was hearing this before COVID. I was hearing this, like you mentioned, about Alberta independence. I was hearing it about the equalization referendum. This is not just a product of COVID, although certainly COVID didn't help.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of that as well, as you said, it's within caucus, it's his leadership style, because I mean, there's been a lot of crabby conservatives. That's what we do. In Saskatchewan, there's side parties have sprung out. In Ontario, there's the Derek Sloan started his, but there hasn't been the internal turmoil to that level going on in Premier Moe's party or in Ford's party. I mean, there's been some individuals, but not this kind of general revolt that the Premier Kenney's been facing.
Well, I mean, the Ford situation, though, is quite interesting. And this is perhaps some perspective that I can bring from Ontario, because Ford has had no hesitation in getting rid of people he believes are problem MPPs, the Ontario version of MLAs. He's turfed, I think by my count, it was about 4 MPPs from his caucus since he was elected 4 years ago. And it might actually be 5, and that's not including a couple of behind the scenes situations that I know of where people didn't run again, but it was actually because they were pushed out. So there's been a lot less of a flexibility in the Ontario PC environment. And again, people would look at that. I mean, that's what produced Roman Baber running for the leadership of the Conservatives, for example. Here's a guy who was, for speaking out against lockdowns and vaccine mandates and vaccine passports, kicked out of the caucus. So you have had, I think, genuinely among MLAs more of an ability to speak out. But again, that hasn't been entirely there. That's why Drew Barnes and Todd Lowen are sitting in the backbenches as independents right now.
Yeah, so do you feel, I imagine that Premier Kenney, assuming if he does survive this review, he's going to perhaps take on more of an approach like Ford and just not put up with any dissent any longer? It's going to be toe the line or you're off to the back bench.
Well, it's possible. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see some sort of a block form that's a little bit stronger. I mean, you may remember, and you probably would better than most, that letter that came out a while ago of MLAs concerned about lockdowns. And it wasn't explicitly an anti-Kenney letter, but you could start to see a potential block form that if there was a more serious challenge to Jason Kenney's leadership brewing, those would be the people who I would look at. And I would also say that, you know, one of the things that's really interesting, Danielle Smith, for example, I had her on my show shortly after she announced she was going to get back in the game. And I said, you know, if Jason Kenney is successful and you're successful at winning the nomination and winning the election, could you even work in that? And she, despite all of the things she said about Jason Kenney's leadership, said, I plan to. So Jason Kenney is going to have to deal with a caucus that could have a Brian Jean in it, that could have a Danielle Smith in it, and could have a number of the other dissidents in it. And I don't know how you enact an agenda, let alone win an election, when you have that much that you need to hold on to, let alone gaining new support.
Well, our politics, if nothing else, are never boring. Before we let you go, I appreciate you coming in from out east there. We know you got an event to get to. Did you want to hazard a guess as to how you think things might turn out tonight?
Yeah, I mean, now I'm just copying Dave, but I have the 55% prediction as well. I mean, if I want to change it, I'll say, 56.2%. That way, if I'm really, really close, you'll be very impressed by my Nostradamus-like Ontarian skills. But I think it's going to be in that window where Jason Kenney claims it's a victory because he said 50% plus one is a win. And other people are saying it's not a win. And I think in a lot of cases, you're back to square one with that. But I think it's going to be above 50 and lower than 60. I'd say probably in that 55, 56 range.
Great. Okay, well, thanks for coming in to join us tonight there, Andrew. Have a good night there out in the evil East. And it's always appreciated when you come on and talk to us.
Take me with you. All I can say is every time I talk to an Albertan, take me with you. I'm one of you at heart.
Right on. Thanks, Andrew. That's Andrew Lawton of the True North Center that we bring in.
That's a very astute political guy, eh?
He is.
55%. Where did I hear that before?
Yeah. He's just taking the safe route. So if it goes poorly, he could blame you.
Mhm. I was watching Danielle Smith's show this morning, and there was a sentiment she put out that I agreed with this morning, and that was that I think a lot of people, especially the people who are just wary from coming through 2 years of a pandemic, just really would like to see a different face, perhaps. I think there's a lot of people who have been feeling that way, but I think, again, in how I've been seeing things, it feels like he's been able to sort of shift gears away from that, away from that topic, and he has, opened things up quite nicely for Albertans, and now has gone on to this topic of building Alberta's economy back, and I think that is kind of overshadowing how I think a lot of people just really lost a lot of faith in him over the pandemic and his flip-flopping.
He backtracked on so many times, the vaccine passport, for example. And Mel, what he's doing now is his election campaign for the next year. Alberta is back. How many times does he say at every press conference? Mm-hmm. Alberta is back. Alberta is back. And you're quite right. They are doing quite well, attracting literally billions and billions of dollars worth of projects to Alberta. And he's right. The economy is turning around. We're expected to lead the nation in economic growth this year. So that's what he's got left. And he's hoping that, hey, we may be trailing badly in the polls, but when people see a year of good economic activity, are they going to want to risk that with another NDP government? So.
Well, and I think if this was happening any closer to the pandemic and some of the fallout, I think the vote would look very different.
Well, lots of, I said, balls in the air, and some of them are going to land tonight. We'll have a better idea. So we're going to move on. We got another guest in the lobby with Janet Brown, and Janet Brown's part of. Is it Janet Brown Opinion? I'm gonna get her to correct me right away when we bring her in. She does opinion polling and very well tapped into the Alberta political scene. Hi, Janet. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, and it is Janet Brown Opinion Research. I tried to make that as straightforward as possible, but
I know, but I'm easily confused, as we can see. So, thank you. And again, for us and as for yourself, it's very interesting political times going on right now. Where do you think, looking on the broader picture, how is this impacting the UCP in general with Albertans? That bigger thing, we're looking at an internal party race, but of course it reflects and it's impacting the voters and Albertans at large, and that's another big concern.
Well, the United Conservative brand is taking a huge hit. I was listening to Andrew Lawton and his predictions and your predictions earlier, and let's go back to 2019 election. Jason Kenney won a huge majority. He had 55% support from the general public and won a huge majority government. Here we are today, 3 years later, and we're wondering if he's going to get 55% with his base. So, the numbers have drastically changed for Jason Kenney. His perception among Albertans has greatly changed. And, the brand is taking a really, really hard hit. So whatever happens to Jason Kenney tonight, whether he remains leader or the party has a chance to pick a new leader, they really have to get back to the basics of this brand, and growing this brand is something that Albertans can trust and get excited about voting for them. One of the rumors that's coming out today is that voter turnout on this special general meeting has been low. We're looking at maybe 35,000 people out of a possible 60,000 people who were sent ballots. My gosh, if you spent money to become a member of this party, if you care enough about politics to become a member of the party, but not enough to send your ballots in, that's another big mark against this party and the strength of this party brand right now.
Yeah, well, and mail-in ballots, are a difficult thing. Unfortunately, voters to a degree, only the motivated ones are going to trouble themselves. But it's hard to read in whether the ones who were motivated to get out there and get their ballots in were the ones that were discontent, or the ones who really want to keep Premier Kenney where he is.
Right, and it's in at these final minutes as we wait for the vote, it's all we can do is speculate. We'll know in a little while, but that's when you're a pollster and you're trying to figure out voter turnout and you're trying to predict elections, well, that's exactly what you're trying to figure out, is what motivates somebody to vote and what disincentivizes somebody not to vote. So I think it's clear to think that the most engaged voters are the ones who are going to have taken the trouble to scan their driver's license and all of that stuff. But who's more motivated tonight? The people who support Jason Kenney or the ones who want him out?
Hey, Janet, you're a pollster. You're driven by the hard data. So I'm going to ask you the question I know you don't want. But we're all putting our money down on this. I'm going to ask Danielle the same question in a minute. I bet whoever wins tonight gets their beers bought for them by everyone else, at least around the office party here. But I've bet 45. Dave Naylor bet 55. I know you don't want to give a number, but if you had to give one, where do you put it?
Well, so you said I'm a data person, and that's exactly right. And so I'm going to say I don't have a bet to make, because I don't have the kind of data I need to make this decision.
I'm asking for a guess. I'm not asking for.
Okay, well, let me say this. I don't even want to say a guess. I'm going to say that as I've talked to many people, just like you have, and I've asked them for their guesses, but I haven't just asked them for their guesses. I've asked them for their logic behind their guesses, right? Mm-hmm. So I want to see who's just kind of going with their gut, and who's actually got some real sort of logic behind their thinking. And so I'm just going to say this: people who are predicting that this vote will be lower than 50% seem to be able to give me more logic for why they feel that way than people who think that Kenney's going to get over 50%. So I think that it sounds like the people who feel Kenney are going to get over 50% sometimes sound like they're drinking their own bathwater. They'll tell me things like, oh, well, Jason Kenney's never lost, so he's not going to lose now. But the people who talk about a number under 50%, they're talking about how many ballots are coming from rural Alberta, how many, what the response rate on those ballots were. They're giving me kind of more logic behind why they think Kenney's going to lose. So that's my cop out, Derek.
No, I mean, if you're not going to give me the guesstimate answer that I knew you really wouldn't, that's probably a good way around it. I've found very much the same thing. I've spoken to a lot of people on both sides, and one side, I don't know if it's wizard math, but at least there's some logic and reasoning to it, and the other side very much is, well, our guy's awesome, and how can he lose?
One side seems to have spreadsheets, and the other one just seems to have ideas.
Yeah, well, I've drinking my own Kool-Aid before, so and I think I know.
Yeah, bathwater is less dangerous than Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
Okay, well, and I mean, so the next half that'll be coming up, though, is going to be analyzing. We're going to have you back a little later in the show, too. Hopefully at that point, we'll have gotten some results, because right now we're all on speculation, and that is what makes it difficult. But once we know where those numbers are, we'll be able to have some at least closer informed speculation as to where the future brings, which will still be pretty volatile and confusing, but a whole new road to go down.
Yeah. Just production again. Let's just change up the title here. UCP AGM. No one knows what that is. Let's just make sure people know that this is the.
Right at the corner.
Yeah, no, but I'm talking about our main title here. Let's just get it up. No one knows what an SGM is. Let's just make sure people know this is the Kenney leadership vote. All right. So Danielle, let's.
Okay.
You're not a pollster. You have no excuse but to give a prediction. And I know it's all got asterisks. I'm terrified. I'm gonna have egg on my face tonight, and everyone's gonna say I told you so and whatnot. And there's always a risk that your predictions are more wishes than predictions. But what's your prediction tonight? Give me a number.
I'll give you a number because I know others are going to be a little more circumspect on it. I say 43%. But I can see a way that he could get above 50%. I know a lot of people are concerned, and as am I, about what appears to be a number of ballots that were, or memberships that were purchased on single credit cards. I think the numbers were 4,691 on 8 credit cards. So that appears to be under investigation by Elections Alberta. But if I could think of the way that he might have been able to get that kind of support, we all know with party membership lists, historically, there have been as many as 150,000 members in the combined UCP, Wild Rose, and PC parties. And as I understand it, those lists were getting called in the lead up to the membership cutoff. So you can imagine a situation, because we all know how this predictive dial technology works. You call somebody up and say, hey, I'm calling on behalf of the UCP. Do you support Jason Kenney? No. Okay, thanks for your time. Do you support Jason Kenney? Yes. Hey, can I renew your membership? And that would be the most credible way that I could see that he could win, because when you look at the votes, and Vitor Marciano, who's on Brian Jean's team, has audited the list, there's no real obvious surge in memberships anywhere in the province except for the nominations that were open. So Brian Jean's nomination, Joseph Scow's nomination down south in Carson Siksika, and Jason Nixon's nomination in Rocky Mountain to House Sundry. Those ones were all over 2,000 memberships, but everywhere else, there seems to be a real enthusiasm gap, quite frankly. And surprising to me, this is the reason why I would go the other way and say that it's likely to be lower, is because the thing that I found most surprising is that you would expect that the ministers would be the most motivated to go out and sell memberships so their boss could keep his job, because if their boss keeps his job, then they keep their job. But the number of ridings that used to have historically thousands of members in the riding are now some of the lowest in the province. Even the Premier's own riding, his is 63rd out of 87.
It's he's got. I might be wrong, but I think it's got like 300 and something members. I mean, that's
completely
paltry.
Yep. The other one I saw, Josephine Pon, who is normally such a reliable membership seller, I think she had one of the lowest in the selection. So the fact that it looks like the ministers were not motivated enough to go out and sell memberships, or had a difficult time selling memberships, I think that's why it's more likely, if you see that there is an enthusiasm deficit in Calgary, but there is an enthusiasm surplus in rural. Rural is not coming out en masse to vote for the Premier for a whole variety of reasons, not just COVID policy, although that one has certainly caused him problems in central and southern Alberta. But I think it's the lack of action on the equalization referendum. The Premier got a very clear mandate to start working on some of that Alberta First agenda. And I think because he's not appeared to be taking the lead on putting Alberta First and fighting Ottawa, I think that's what's caused even greater problems for him. And that's certainly a big issue in rural Alberta.
So you were kind of getting to the numbers here. That's coming from, we had a story about a month and a half ago that had a riding by riding breakdown of where all the members were at. I know CBC had their own version, I think, about a week ago, but we've had that out for about a month and a half about where are the members. And the membership is very heavily concentrated in a few rural, mostly formerly Wild Rose ridings. I think it's 25% of the membership is in roughly 11 constituencies. To you, I don't think that bodes well for Kenney if that's really where it's focused.
No, and especially when you look at what happened in those ridings. So let me just look at 3 of them, for instance. So Brian Jean clearly won his nomination and then went on to win the riding. And I would say the lion's share of those members are probably going to be voting no to do you approve of the leader question. Down in Carson Siksika, where Jody Gateman was disqualified, again, most of those memberships are sold by her. I suspect that those are pretty solid now. Same with Tim Hoven, who was challenging Jason Nixon in central Alberta. Thousands of memberships, I think over 2,000. Those would also be voting no.
And both of these were nomination candidates who were disqualified, I think on pretty flimsy grounds, almost certainly to protect the incumbents who were pro-Kenney MLAs or.
Yeah, and it's
or
unfortunate
ministers.
he did that too. I mean, I can see why he would want to keep his House leader and his deputy House leader. Those are the two key positions to help you navigate legislation through the House. And there's a lot he wants to get done, but there's a way he could have done it. I think what happened, and this is, I think, really telling, is that my understanding is that there were going to be a lot more nominations that were supposed to open up prior to this leadership vote. So he opens up two that were supposed to be safe ridings, and then what the heck happened? They weren't safe at all. And so I think that there's been a stall on the nomination process until the leadership is sorted out. But that's not what you want. I mean, part of why we have a leadership contest in a political party is to affirm support for the leader, affirm that he's got the backing of the lion's share of his party so that you can go in strong into the next election to beat the other guys. And if he scrapes in with marginal support or less than, I mean, if you look historically, you kind of want 80% or more in a leadership vote. And the fact that he's lowered expectations down to 50%, I don't know that a leader can survive that. They can say they're going to hang on, but in the end, caucus members have to have confidence that they can win their seat under that leader. If they don't have confidence they can win that seat under the leader, then anything is possible in caucus politics, and that's going to happen tomorrow morning.
So just to be quick here, actually, I know we've got maybe let Janet close out there because she does have an obligation.
Janet's still here.
Oh, I thought Janet was gone.
I thought she ducked out.
No, and she's going to be with another one of those news outlets in a little bit here as well. But
I have 3 more minutes, yeah.
Okay, so just if you wanted to add a little more before you take off, and hopefully when we get you back in, we can talk about what has occurred.
Yeah, no, I don't have too much more to add. It's just, but I was listening to Danielle and she was talking about where the votes are coming from. And as I said earlier, it's just, we just have to be patient at this point. But as I said earlier, when you kind of, look just at the numbers, take the emotion out of it, look how heavily weighted this is towards rural voters. Look at how Brian Jean's by-election went. Look at how mad people were about the change in the venue and everything. The numbers do not look good for Kenney. But the thing is we've all learned over these many, many years not to underestimate Kenney. So we just have to be patient at this point. The other thing I just will add before I go, and I think many of your guests will say the same thing, it doesn't matter what the result is tonight. There's still a lot of uncertainty. There's still a lot to be discovered. So if he loses tonight, we have the uncertainty of trying to figure out who the next leader is going to be. If he wins tonight, we have the uncertainty of trying to figure out how he keeps this caucus together until the next election.
Well, Janet, just I love speculation, and that's really all we can do until we have the results. So let's go into some of that speculation on what that leadership race looks like. Maybe you could speak specifically about what candidates you think will be competitive or those who will run, because not everybody runs because they tend to really win. There's all sorts of reasons you could run, and then also maybe what kind of candidate you think the party is going to be looking for. I know someone in close proximity to me probably has thoughts about candidates who might be running to replace Jason Kenney, but some of your thoughts.
Well, I'm going to cop out of this question too. It's hard to predict. And, also when we get tonight's number, we're going to be trying to sort of say, well, what does this mean? Where is Jason Kenney's discontent coming from? And I don't think we're going to be able to know exactly where that's coming from. We're going to have people who describe themselves as centrist and miss the old progressive side of the Progressive Conservative Party. They're voting against Jason Kenney. The people who are mad because he didn't do enough on the fair deal proposals, they're voting against Kenney. The people who just think he's mean and is running a poor government, they're voting against him. So we're going to have to take stock of where all this discontent is coming from. And then we've got to figure out, when this party comes together, what are they looking for in a leader? Are they looking for somebody who's more left-wing, more centrist, more right-wing, more likable? There is going to be so many things for this party to sort through if they're voting for a new leader starting tomorrow.
Well, Janet, we really appreciate your time for joining us here today. I'm sorry, I thought we were already done with your time.
It's okay. It's okay. And Corey has me coming back at 6, so I'll see you then.
Very good. Hopefully we've got some results by then. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.
Well, Danielle, other than yours truly, who do you think is likely to take a stab at the leadership should Kenney go down tonight? there's some of the obvious ones, and not everyone runs because they think they can win. A lot of people run to raise their profile, and there's 100 different reasons to run for a leader. What do you think that race looks like if Kenney's gone tonight?
First, let me say that you can have a really exciting leadership race with a small number of candidates. Look what's happening at the federal level. I'm told that they now have at the federal level the largest number of memberships they've ever had in their political history, which is pretty remarkable. And I think they only have 6 candidates who made the final cut. So let's assume that we get, I would hope in Alberta that if the job comes open, that there'd be 6 or a dozen candidates. So I've already said that I would put my name forward. Brian Jean has already said he would put his name forward. I think it's pretty clear that Todd Loewen is interested in finding a pathway back into the UCP. And I believe he has demonstrated leadership over the last year or two. He was one of the first to come out and say that and speak on behalf of the freedom movement. So I think he would put his name into the race. I don't know if Drew Barnes could be persuaded to come back in. I know he's got leadership aspirations, but he's got this idea of a rural party that would only run seats in 41 ridings. So there's that. You've got Paul Hinman coming up. I don't know if Paul could be persuaded to come back into the UCP fold.
We'll ask Paul in a few minutes.
I know. I see him there in the waiting room. So you're going to have to ask him.
He's chuckling. I can see him.
But wouldn't that be something if Paul Hinman came back in? Because he did also support Jason Kenney initially when he first came in, and only recently became disaffected, I think. Then when you look at the cabinet side of things, even looking at Don Braid's column today, he was speculating about who might be interim leader. And that's really quite an interesting tell, is that there's a number of people now jockeying to be interim leader. Rajan Sani and Dmitry Nicolaitis and Nathan Newdorf, who was the caucus chair.
Well, Rick McIver,
and Rick McIver, correct.
Rick McIver was interim leader of the Progressive Conservatives after their 2015 defeat. He's a very inoffensive. He doesn't set anyone on fire, but he doesn't really get under anyone's skin either. He's a nice guy.
Solid.
He's reliable.
Yeah.
The Reds like him. The Blues.
Do you know what I like about Rick McIver? Because I interviewed him several times when I was on radio. He just tells it like it is. If he doesn't know the answer, he says, "Look, I don't know the answer to that." And
who says that?
I know it's quite refreshing and amazing. So those 5 names would be jockeying for interim, and if you can only be one interim leader, which means the other 4 are potential leadership candidates as well. And then Braid also said the reason that Travis Taves, finance minister, and Doug Schweitzer, who's jobs and economy minister, are not on that interim list is because they are seen to be 2 candidates that would put their name forward for leadership. So, I think I've listed off pretty close to 10 candidates, and I think it would be pretty exciting if you got 10 candidates all out there selling 20,000 memberships each. Now you've got 200,000 strong party, and that's the kind of strength that you need if you're going to go into a contested race against Rachel Notley. Rachel Notley's formidable. I know that everyone likes to downplay her chances, but from what I've watched of the poll numbers, she has been at 40 to 44% consistently from the moment that she lost the election all the way through COVID and even still today. And so there needs to be a united conservative movement if she's going to be defeated. And so I think that a robust leadership race with the names that I put forward would be the way to do that.
Well, let's bring in Michael Solberg here. Michael Solberg is, he's, I don't use the bad term, but he's a lobbyist. Not the lobbyists are such bad guys. Sorry, the name of your firm again, Mike?
Yeah, thanks, Phildy. I'm a partner at New West Public Affairs, government relations firm based here in Alberta.
That's it. So Mike is a longtime participant in Alberta politics. I would say he is a man of significance within the United Conservative Party. Comes from a storied family from the Reform Party. Mike, I don't want to pigeonhole you, but if I can ask, where this has been obviously a very divisive time for Alberta Conservatives. What side have you generally found yourself on?
Yeah, no, and I'm hearing you chat with Janet. If you're looking for wild speculation, then today's your lucky day. I'm happy to weigh in on all of this. But I will tell you, at this moment, I believe Jason Kenney is going to win. I'll differ from probably most of your guests in saying that. I suppose my bias is firmly rooted in the fact that Jason Kenney, up until this point, and perhaps beyond tonight, has so far had a blemish-free political career. He's won everything he's ever set out to do, including some highly aspirational and highly ambitious goals, which he ultimately achieved, such as coming to Alberta and uniting 2 warring political parties and holding that coalition together long enough to have a landslide victory in 2019. And all of this has led me to believe that You cannot underestimate the man. His political mobilization is second to really none in the political conservative political establishment in the country, and I think that he's pulling all the levers necessary, and I think will identify his vote and ultimately come out with a victory today.
So, I mean, you are making one of the arguments that Janet said that some of the folks who predict Kenney is going to survive make, which is, well, he's never lost before. And the past often is an indicator of past patterns are often an indicator of future actions. And he has never even come close to losing anything ever, which makes it kind of astounding that the one thing that has been always the biggest question mark of if he will survive is the thing that almost every politician does survive, which is leadership races. Canadian leaders extremely seldom actually lose an outright majority in leadership review vote. I could be mistaken, but I think the only two in Canadian history who have outright lost the majority were John Diefenbaker, for who this whole process was literally created in the 1960s, and then Thomas Mulcair, former NDP leader. He lost. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm not aware of any other leadership review vote where someone has lost outright. These are normally the easiest things for a leader, and the question is, are you going to be in the 90s, 80s, or 70s? But if I'm not aware if any leader has ever survived in Canada in the 50s. I think very few have survived in the 60s. I know in Ontario, former PC leader John Tory, he got 66. He tried to stay, but he was gone within a few months from there. I'm not aware of any. Surely someone's made it in the 60s before, but definitely not the 50s. Do you think that if he lands in the 50s, which is, I think, a reasonable prediction, is just going to be somewhere between 45 and 55? It's not too speculative to say he could be in the 50s. Can he survive if he can't break out of the 50s at least?
Well, it depends on your definition of survival. If it simply means will he stay on, then yes, I think he absolutely could survive this vote tonight. And I think if he does get anywhere in that range, a simple majority, 51% plus result, I think he'll accept that as a reaffirmation of his leadership by the membership. And I think it's, you point to a lot of convention and other leadership, other leaders of other political parties leaving after 60, 70% results. Sure, that's well understood, but it is in a representative democracy, democracy in general, 51% represents the majority and the will of the people, and I think he has a leg to stand on, saying that this is the will of the membership and he should be allowed to continue to move forward. However, I think the real narrative and what we're all watching for is how the dust settles should he move forward in that fashion. How many MLAs rail against those results and ultimately leave, either under their own volition or because they're removed by the premier for open insubordination, something that he so far has tolerated to a complete degree. He's allowed many of his.
I think Todd Lowen and Drew Barnes might disagree, but
in the premier's defense, at least the official narrative is that it was caucus colleagues who ultimately voted him out behind closed doors.
Well, I suppose.
Well, that's what occurred, and he's tolerated it to a complete degree. In his defense, he's allowed a number of his caucus colleagues to openly campaign against him, Brian Jean included, but a number of his caucus mates as well. And I think after tonight's result, should he be reaffirmed as leader of the party, that will be something he no longer tolerates. He said as much. So I'd imagine we'll see Alberta legislature that looks a lot different today or tomorrow than it does, let's say, today or in the days to come. I don't know if it'll be 4 MLAs, 3 MLAs. It could be 10 MLAs. We'll have to wait and see. But the stakes are also high for them as well. These so-called dissident MLAs and the folks who have been a source of malcontent to the premier and his leadership. They're not necessarily wanting to rush out the door and no longer be UCP candidates or UCP MLAs. So they're really going to have to put their money where their mouth is if they ultimately are going to take a principled stance against the continued leadership of the premier, should the membership reaffirm that tonight.
So let's mix that up between you, Mike, and Danielle, what that looks like. I think there are very few. I've spoken to a few supporters of the premier who I think are medicated to some degree, who think that if Kenney gets 50% plus one, then everyone's just going to say, well, that's it. It's over. Everyone's going to fall in line and everyone's going to be united and say kumbaya. I don't think any realistic supporter of the Premier or opponent of the Premier believes that. I think
Sure.
you're right, Mike, and I think that's a realistic appraisal, even from that side, that there's going to be a bloodletting, a reckoning of some kind, if the Premier survives this evening's
Absolutely.
vote in some kind of not greatly large majority. Daniel, what do you think that looks like, both in the legislature and in terms of the potential constellation of parties in Alberta?
Well, I think that's unfortunate that the premier has already said that there's going to be a bloodletting. Not sure who used that term.
That was my term.
That was your term, but I guess this is the real problem, is that going into an election, the leader is supposed to bring the party up. The leader is supposed to be the one whose everyone coattails get ridden in on. That's part of the reason why you have a leader. Is normally when it comes down to the final ballot, who am I going to vote for, Jason Kenney or Rachel Notley? People will vote for the person that they like the most. If it's so thin, his victory, then he's going to be asking the rest of his party to pull him up in order to win. And that is a very unusual state of affairs. And the worry I have, and this is something I've been telling his team for over a year, is he's got to call people. He's got to make amends. There's no reason why Drew Barnes should be on the outside. There's no reason why Todd Loewen should be on the outside. There's no reason why Brian Jean can't be persuaded to join the team. I've heard that he doesn't talk to caucus members. He doesn't talk to cabinet ministers. He doesn't talk to organizers. He doesn't talk to fundraisers. And that, I think, is principally the reason why the premier has lost ground. And from what I'm hearing, if he's just going to continue to go on a warpath, then we don't have a united conservative movement anymore. We are likely going to see at least 6 parties: Brian Jean's party, Todd Loewen's party, Drew Barnes's party, Paul Hinman's party. There's this new Buffalo party. The Alberta Prosperity Project is supporting an independence party. And now we have the UCP. So 7 parties on the right, 1 party representing the left-wing vote. That is not a pathway to win a majority government.
Mike, I really don't think that there actually really is reconciliation between the Premier and most of the dissidents that Danielle just mentioned. I think I would put those dissidents in the red category. I'd also put Angela Pitt in there, Peter Guthrie, Jason Steffen. I think there's a good Dave Hansen. I think there's a good 6 at least who I'd put in the red category. Those people I don't think have any interest in reconciling with Kenney, especially if he doesn't have a strong mandate. But then there's probably those who are in more of a gray zone, who have been critics and very unhappy, maybe even actively worked against the Premier, but are not maybe not as outspoken.
Sure.
What do you think the chances are that the Premier is going to be able to bring about some kind of reconciliation? And you could, if you like, you could break down your answer between those who are maybe in the gray and those who are in the red. Sure.
Well, I think to Daniel's point, that's just been part of the challenges that have ultimately resulted in this leadership review. And the Premier, should he be reaffirmed as leader tonight, needs to reach across the aisle. And by that, I mean just to those independent MLAs, namely Drew and Todd. I think that would do a lot to please the membership. And also, it would do an enormous amount to please their caucus colleagues, many of whom remain friends and colleagues and sometimes collaborators with Todd and Drew. I think that would do a lot to bridge the divide within the party. And that's step 1, should the Premier win tonight, is to start repairing the internal division within the party. However, we can't remove the onus completely from these dissident MLAs and also playing ball with the Premier. We can no longer tolerate this type of open dissent, open insubordination of the leader. It's fine to carry these types of gripes and grievances within an internal caucus setting behind closed doors. And it happens in any party. But one thing that the UCP has very uncharacteristically seen is open dissent, public dissent, leaking of information from cabinet and caucus meetings.
We haven't had any leaks around here.
Yeah, now that you're unfamiliar with this, I'm sure. Caucus meetings being essentially live streamed by certain media outlets that I won't name. But they need to come to the table as well and be willing to work with the Premier as well. There is a relationship that I think needs to go both ways. Should there be healing within the party that is so necessary if this party is going to compete in a way that I think we all know it can in 2023 against a very well prepared and frankly united New Democratic Party that's polling so well right now and continues to threaten to gain ground in some of the battlegrounds that the UCP, I think, right now are losing support, namely Calgary. So It's important for, I think, all these parties to come to the table with a willingness to unite and move forward should the results indicate that that's what's necessary.
Corey, let's say the result's 55 for the sake of argument here. Danielle's made the case that he needs to reach out to the dissidents and try and bring them in. I'd put the dissidents kind of into, there's a spectrum of them, and there's the red hot ones. I really don't think guys like Brian G. He's the first MLA ever elected to a caucus on a platform of getting rid of the leader of said caucus. I'm highly suspect that there is any common ground there whatsoever. The two who are outside of caucus sitting as independent conservatives, Angela Pitts, Peter Guthrie, Jason Stephens, these guys, I'm not sure if there's reconciliation there, but then there's the gray ones. Do you think if we've got a result of 55, does Kenney then have any chance of succeeding at reconciliation, or does everything get worse?
Well, I guess if he's genuine, it's as we said, he's got to communicate. You got to reach out, learn from it. Then there's been a problem. He's got to understand, I think he does, that it hasn't been done right. That's why we're in the mess we're in right now. I would imagine get on the phone as soon as this thing's over, pour some coffee, and start reaching out one-on-one to every one of them. Start with the grays. You might as well start there, and then see how you can ease on to the reds. But that's his only hope is get them in and talk to them. I mean, it's like running any business or any other thing. Just sometimes it's amazing how just a listening ear and a 5-minute exchange can make so much difference.
But is it too
I've
late
talked to
for all of
caucus
that?
members who haven't heard from him in months. And come on, I mean, I understand you can't talk to every backbencher every week, but you've got to make it feel like that they're part of the process.
But is it too late for that?
Well, I don't know. I see the time will tell, but as far as strategy goes, I think that's all he can do then. If you come in with that low number, is get in there and try and consolidate so you aren't greeted next week by a hornet's nest with 10, 12 floor crossers or more fires to put out.
Well, let me put the same question to you, Mike. Is it too late if the premier walks out of this in the scenario we're kind of painting here of 55%, is it too late for the premier to be able to, at least with those gray dissidents, those who aren't, every single day tweeting how the premier needs to be catapulted into the outside the moat. Is it too late? And beyond just the caucus, let's, I think we're at risk in this conversation, maybe thinking of the caucus as the party. I think he's got more support in the caucus than he does in the party at large. I think it's very fair to say.
Yeah.
Those who are upset with him, there's a spectrum of reasons. There are fair dealers and people who are believe in Alberta autonomy to independence. There's a spectrum there. Those people are at him. There's people who are upset with lockdowns, vaccine mandates, and that. Those people are broadly kind of to his right. And Jason is not very comfortable, I think, ever defending on his right flank. I think it's an uncomfortable position for him to be in. And he can make the argument, at least with the autonomy or independence crowd, that, well, I'm the best you've got and that kind of thing. But I think he's got a tougher argument making that to people upset over lockdowns and vaccine mandates, because they see him very much a little different than Justin Trudeau, because the actual results have been very similar, although he'll make arguments that, it's, we ended the restrictions earlier and that kind of stuff. But those are very marginal arguments. Those people, I have a hard time seeing how he can reconcile himself to those people. Mike, is there really a plausible way for Kenney to bring those people back into the tent, or at some point is he going to have to cut bait?
A lot to unpack there, but he better hope it's not too late. Those red zone MLAs also better hope it's not too late. In the case of almost all of them, like Tom Lawton, for example, I respect a great deal. He's a fantastic MLA. He's a man of principle. But at present, he's shivering out in the cold. And would he win again running as an independent? Probably not. These are deeply held UCP held ridings where most of these so-called dissident MLAs are currently representing. They better hope that they can stay in the party. Otherwise, their political careers are at risk. So I think there'll be a bit of a give and take, at least as far as the MLAs are concerned. But on the party writ large, should there be a slim margin of victory tonight, which I think is most of us are treating it like a foregone conclusion, it'll be slim at best. I think the premier's next move needs to be with a speech tonight. I think he needs to be very hat in hand, thank his supporters, of course, but also recognize that a lot of people didn't vote for him. Probably nearly 50% of the party membership would not have voted for them. And he needs to have a message for them too. He needs to wear some egg on his face, and I think approach this with some humility. And then in terms of actual action, he needs to go out and do a summer tour, something that he's accustomed to doing. But I think he needs to visit these areas and really listen to the concerns that are there. And whether or not he can enact them into policy, I think depends on the issue. It's the ultimate quagmire of governing this province, is that, you know, value sentiments differ in some cases significantly between rural and urban, and that's something that all governments have had to deal with over the years. There's a reason why the Wildrose Party was formed in the first place, and the reason why the coalition is hard to keep together at all, and that is why. But he needs to make that effort. We are in the election cycle a year at most away from the next election. The Premier needs to do a lot of work, hit the pavement, really listen, and really be humble, and enact that servant leadership that he claimed that he wanted to implement at the beginning, and less of the top-down approach that we've seen, which has ultimately been the impetus for this review in the first place.
Yeah, well, he's certainly got his work cut out for him. And as you said, the first thing we'll find out and get a hint on where he's going is going to be the speech after the results come in, presuming he does win it. So we'll watch with interest, of course, and hopefully those results are coming in soon. So thanks for joining us, Michael. It was good to see you there.
Yeah, thanks so much, Corey. Thanks, Phil D. Thanks, Danielle. A big fan of all of you, and hope to come on again soon.
Right on. Thanks. We'll talk again.
Cheers.
So yes, that was Michael Solberg, and as going over there, we're changing our panel again here. The live stuff is always fun. We've had Paul Hinman in the lobby for a bit here. Let's pull him into the stream. Paul is the leader of the Wildrose Independence Party, because we need to talk about the options that are out there as well outside of the party altogether. What about people who have soured themselves on the UCP itself, looking for a new option? I would say arguably that's Paul's got the most viable right of center party as an alternative that's out there. So how are you doing tonight, Paul?
Well, doing very good, Corey. How about yourself?
Good. I imagine, it's ironic, but it's the reality of politics. This is a UCP function going on, but it impacts your plans, your future, and you're watching this quite closely as the head of your party right now as well.
Well, I guess I'd say yes and no, whether it impacts us the same. This is really a huge impact on Albertans, on knowing, who's going to be the captain of the ship and where it's going. And Jason Kenney, for all practical reasons, has failed to be able to bring his crew together. And it's going to be interesting tonight, but I'm with Michael. I think he's going to squeak through with a win. And again, these dissidents, all of a sudden they're going to find themselves on the outside when the vote's gone the other way. And again, here in Canada, how many leaders actually have a good majority going forward? And I know we're talking party politics, but the fact of the matter is, if he survives, he's going to go forward. And those dissidents all of a sudden are going to say, well, the people have spoken, he's got their support. And I see, either Jason Kenney's out, or you're going to see a lot of people doing mea culpas and saying, well, he's the leader and the people have spoke, so we'll accept that.
Yeah. So, and I mean, again, you've always campaigned as your party's an individual unit. What the other party will do is what they'll do. Yep. But as I said, they're tied together, in reality in politics as well. So let's say if there was a circumstance where Kenney narrowly won, you've got, I guess I could say, a number of political refugees in caucus who are looking for a new political home. Would there be a consideration then of bringing them under the Wildrose Independence Party banner? And what sort of conditions would there be applied to that sort of crossing?
Well, absolutely. Our door's always open for people who have seen the light and realized that the current system isn't working and that we need to go forward with a new one. But I mean, you can't come in being a federalist and want to join the Wildrose Independence Party. And many of them, and I'm going to say this has been the problem, I want to say, with the rural caucus and those people in there, is that they're paranoid of where the polls are. And when they see, independents at 35 or 40%, says, oh, we can't be part of that, we can't be part of that. And they're driven by the polls and the numbers. I've spoken with I've spoken with the MLAs, and again, they're nervous. They're looking for a safe place and a safe ship to sail on. And at this point, Wildrose certainly is not a safe ship to see them to step over to. But again, if in fact they're being thrown off the other one, it's amazing what people will do for survival and actually come to their senses and realize, well, we got to do what we've got to do. And so it'll be interesting. But like I say, we're certainly open. We have principled parties. Our policies are just rock solid. and people who want better government and a future for Alberta, and not to be subject to Ottawa and their draconian policies that ultimately are going to destroy Alberta and our future. We're excited to have some MLAs that would look and think that, yeah, this is the place to go.
So I've got, now we've shook up our panel here, and I've got Josh from Project Confederation.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, just have you been in talks with any MLAs about potentially joining, and have they put any conditions on it at this point?
Well, the condition on all of them has been, we got to wait and see what the leadership review does. they're all waiting for the votes to be cast, and right now they're staying on the ship where they think, you know, that they have their best option.
Do you think that they would maybe come and join you if the opportunity arose?
Well, you know, I always look at politics for what I call politicians is your capital, and it's no different than investments. And you have those people that are entrepreneurs and willing to start and to work from the ground level up. But you have the other ones that they're only worried about saving their capital. And right now, to join us is a risk. I mean, if you want to have a future in politics and say that, you know, oh, I've got to stay elected, you look at the numbers, and we're not your first pick. And that's where these individuals are. They want to keep their job. They want to stay elected. And I guess you can't blame them for that. But until the vote comes out, I mean, it's anybody's game. Who knows what's going to happen until we know the vote? And again, I think he'll squeak through. And I think most of those MLAs will then be running back and saying, oh, well, you know, the people have spoken, so I can support them.
Yeah, no, and I imagine, I mean, the thing is too, if anybody's going to join, you want them because they're ideologically along the same lines of what the Wildrose Independence Party offers, not just because it was a place of refuge if the UCP is in difficulty. Not every person in the UCP who might want to leave the caucus would necessarily feel comfortable with a Wildrose caucus either. So, I mean, there's a lot. Boy, it's so hard to keep speculating on these things. I just an update to everybody, and I saw a commenter put it out. The results are now, there's an update has finally come saying that they're expected around 5:30 p.m. So it shouldn't be too much longer before we have a much better idea of what kind of monster we're wrestling with here. So
I'm around 5:30, so probably 6.
That's very possibly with Premier Kenney's
Most
record for
likely,
being on time, but we'll see. We're seeing movement anyways, which is good. All right, but I appreciate you coming in to talk to us, Paul. You know, there's so many people out there trying to build the options to represent Alberta, and you've been hitting the ground hard, and you're still at it. As I said, you know,
we're truly the viable option. And again, Fort McMurray, you know, we didn't do as good as we thought, but again, that really was an election on Jason Kenney, and you know, 63% of Albertans are against him, and that's what came out and supported the winner there. That was, you know, campaigning solely on getting rid of Jason. But the fact of the matter is that Alberta's in trouble. That Ottawa is viciously attacking us and is going to continue. And we'd have to have a different route. And that's what the Wildrose Independence Party is actually giving Albertans a way out and an opportunity to say no to Ottawa. We're not going to have you making the decisions for our future anymore, or shutting down our oil and gas operations to buy from Russia or Venezuela or some other rogue nation. It's just preposterous to think that they want to carry on and continue to viciously attack Alberta. And so we're excited to give Albertans that option and that choice in the next ballot.
Great. Well, you've always been consistent, Paul, and I really appreciate it. So thanks for coming to talk to us tonight. I'll let you get back out there to watching, well, this race, and then I'm sure we'll all be watching the hockey game as that comes out, the other battle of Alberta going on tonight.
Yep. Thanks, and see you again. Take care.
You bet. Thanks, Paul. Okay, so we do have a packed lineup of guests, which is good because these results, as we say, just keep taking a while. We didn't anticipate they would come right at 4, but they warned us they could come at 4, so we've been ready for it. And of course, we got a lot of blowhards and bloviators, so we can talk at length. But
We can't talk about Derek like that.
well,
when he's not here.
I can see through the glass window here. He's not listening, so I'm doing it while I get
the
away
show
with
may be on in there. Yeah, he's not very happy.
it. All right, let's bring the MLA, UCP MLA for, is it Airdrie Cochrane or Cochrane Airdrie? He'll correct me in a moment. It's Pete Guthrie. He's been very outspoken on these issues, and he's agreed to join us tonight to talk about this race. How's it going, Mr. Guthrie?
Hi, it's going well. Thanks for having me on.
Great, I appreciate it. I just, if you could correct me, I don't have my notes in front of me. You don't imagine the scramble when we get things rolling. But so it's Airdrie Cochrane?
Airdrie Cochrane, right? I live in
Okay,
Cochrane.
very good. So, I mean, you've been one of the more outspoken MLAs, critical of Premier Kenney. I imagine, of course, because of that, you're watching these results very closely. Maybe a question I could kind of put out, though. I mean, is there still room for you to work within a Kenney-led caucus?
You know, I think that you know, my opinion of leadership is not going to change because of the outcome of these results. You know, of the outcome of this review. My opinion is formed, and it's formed on 3.5 years of being in this caucus and with the premier as leader.
Okay, I know it was a tough one to throw out at the start, but I mean, we might as well begin there, because I mean, then otherwise you go down the lines. Well, would 70% be enough, or 55, or 48? So I imagine you'll examine things like so many others once you have solid numbers in front of you. Dave, would you?
Yeah. So does that mean, Peter, that if Kenney survives with 50.1%, you'll take steps to become a independent MLA, or will you? Where does your political future in the immediate area lie?
Yeah, I'd have to give it some careful consideration. I'm trying not to get ahead of myself. Dependent upon the result, I will have some discussions that I'll have to have with my family as well as with my board, and move forward from there. But you don't want to do anything rash. I think that you need to have a cool head when you make those kind of decisions. So I would have to wait it out a little bit.
So, sorry, Corey. So win or lose, you'll be at the UCP caucus meeting tomorrow morning.
That's right. Yep, I'll be there 11 o'clock at McDougall. And I think that this is going to be a tight race. I think, like many, I've run these numbers every which way you can think of, and I think it's going to be close. The premier has controlled all the levers associated with this, and organized the parameters in his favor. I think that it would be difficult to see how he couldn't come through this, but I don't see him coming through with a real strong mandate, perhaps something in the 50s.
Yeah, let's talk about that process a little bit. There's been a lot of concern about the legitimacy of the vote. I was wondering if you could just comment on some of the tactics you've seen from the premier, whether it be use of staff on the leadership campaign or changing the date or so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, traditionally these are done in person, and that's what the party wanted to run with. Leadership reviews of the past normally bring in about 2,300 to 2,500 people. That SGM that was planned April 9th in Red Deer was going to have about 16,000. That showed a massive amount of interest. And typically that kind of interest means change. Let's face it. There was polling being done by the party and by the premier's team, and they felt that the best scenario for them was to change the format and going to a mail-in ballot system, a system in which the president of the UCP said herself that was one that was and couldn't be secure. But in order to try to salvage this, they altered all those parameters, and here we are tonight waiting for what looks like another 25 minutes to find out what the result will be.
At least, yeah.
So trust in the party itself. I mean, the system is one question. Then there's the party, and there's been a lot of lost trust. But say, presuming there's a fresh, I guess, things refresh tomorrow, and we've got it looks like a new leadership on the way. What lessons have we learned? Like, how can the party, that you got a short period of time before the next election, what does the party got to do to regain that trust? And what lessons, how can we avoid repeating the gap in leadership that sort of led to the mess that we're in today?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And the number one word that I do hear is trust. That is the number one word that I hear from constituents, and that what I hear with talking with Albertans from border to border. So that is something that needs to be reestablished, and it's hard to get that back. But I do think that it is doable. But we do have to change how we operate. And so I think from the Premier, one of the things you would like to see is him reaching out, is him trying to acknowledge that some change in his style is something that he's comfortable with doing, and with working within caucus, but not only with caucus, with the boards as well as constituents and all Albertans.
I think you may have just answered the question I was going to ask, Peter, but if Kenney does win and he'll be speaking tonight, what do you want to hear from him?
The dialogue thus far has been really one of the status quo, that he plans on maintaining the current style. He doesn't see any errors in his ways, except for the possibility of being too soft. I don't think that that kind of approach moving forward would be one that would help the future of caucus. So we need to see him change on that sort of dialogue, and that remains to be seen. But the proof is in the pudding, and I'm not sure whether or not he's going to be willing to do that. Thus far, he's shown and indicated that he's not going to do that.
Now, there's been a lot of chatter through Don Braid or even the Western Standard or Rick Bell that Kenney feels that he's been too tolerant of dissident views, and that there's been speculation that moves might be made to, for lack of a better term, execute dissident MLAs. Do you think that there's any advantage in making a move before Kenney can make a move, if that makes sense?
Yeah. I don't see that as something that the Premier would want to do. Especially in a close vote, one where he's getting in the 50s. I think that would aggravate the situation. So I would more so see him reading caucus, the Riot Act, and saying, hey, look, if we're going to move forward, we're 12 months to an election. We have to be on the same team. And we can't have MLAs out, being in contravention of leadership. So let's get back on board, and let's go out and defeat the NDP in the next election. I think that would be more so the messaging that we would see from him, rather than coming out and pulling off the Band-Aid and getting rid of a bunch of MLAs. I think that would really hurt caucus, and it would damage the relationship with members. And I don't think that the general public would appreciate it. So it's not a path that I think he will go down, but I could be wrong.
Well, he's shown a certain shamelessness up to this point, so we'll see what happens there.
So if the Premier, though, perhaps doesn't win, or it's a low number and he decides it's time to step back, we're going to move into a leadership race situation. As you said, though, I mean, the strategy, even if he wins, would be we're getting ready for an election. It's a year from now. Well, that also eats a big bite out of the year with a leadership race. It would certainly rejuvenate things and offer that opportunity. But I can imagine it would have to be scheduled quite quickly, and that caucus will really have to unite to be able to pull off, I think, a fast, definitive leadership race and then start preparing for the next election.
Yeah, I think it would, probably take about 4 to 5 months. Perhaps a month to get organized, then take in candidate applications, then a couple of weeks to assess those, and then open up to a race in order to try to have it done by October, let's say. So yeah, the time frame is small, but it is still doable. And you're right. I mean, it does a lot of things. It really can reinvigorate the party. Get a bunch of candidates out there, and I think there would be a lot of candidates that would come forward. But it would get candidates out there promoting the party, generating interest, bringing in new members, and attracting donations to the party. This is an area where we're being outraised by the opposition, and we're a year to an election. I think we have less than $1.5 million in the bank. You probably want to see that in the order of 5 to 7 million. So there's a lot of work to be done over the course of these 12 months, and a leadership contest would help to accomplish that.
Yeah, Danielle was saying something along those lines, just with the federal party as well. I mean, a leadership race, I mean, assuming it's not too insanely divisive like the top two contenders say in the federal race, but all the same, a good solid leadership race can really help build a party. I mean, that motivates, I mean, constituencies are something we're not hearing a lot about, but I think a lot of them are in pretty dire condition right now, and you really need them set up and functional in order to fight that election as well. Perhaps a leadership race could help spawn that, because again, volunteers are going to be out organizing, selling memberships, and networking in a way that they wouldn't otherwise when you get a status quo premier.
Yeah, that's a good point, especially where there's no sitting MLA. I think that they would have a lot more trouble raising funds. So on that local level to try to support that candidate. Generally, you would have other MLAs out there supporting those stranded ridings. But yeah, this would be certainly something that would help that. When you have candidates traveling all across the province trying to get the good word out for the party, that's going to do nothing except for generate interest and help out those local constituency associations.
Yeah, I guess my next question is more along the lines of the hypothetical situation if there is a potential leadership race. Given what we've just gone through with COVID and everything like that, do you think that we would be going into an issues-based campaign, or would it be more of a personality-based campaign, depending on who's in it? But
yeah, that's an interesting question. Generally there's a combination that would take place. I mean, obviously you need to have a candidate that is likable, one that's going to bridge that gap between the urban and rural, which is very important. And I think that you can certainly, traveling around the province, feel that maybe a little bit of divide has occurred there, where rural Albertans maybe feel like they're not being well represented, or at least not being heard, I think would probably be a little bit more accurate. So that's the important thing. So you do have issues that are going to be looming, and I think healthcare being one. Tackling the healthcare system it's a tough battle, and for any political party to say that they're going to go after healthcare and they're going to reform it, it's a real tough animal. But I think that Albertans are ready for that, and I think that it's got to be at the forefront of any campaign platform.
Right. Well, we're all going to be watching very closely, and as I said with others, I just hope that they can get this out before the hockey game starts. As much as this leadership review is very important on many levels, there's going to be a lot of distraction in Alberta as well. There's more than one battle going on tonight.
Well, I don't want to worry you, Corey, but they've now removed the results expected at 5:30 thing on the website. So
yeah, it's become indeterminate again. Well, we'll see. But we appreciate you coming to talk to us. I know, of course, you're watching very closely, as are a lot of Albertans tonight, Mr. Guthrie. Anything else you'd like to add in closing before you get back to the waiting game with the rest of us here?
Well, no, thanks for having me on. And yeah, I think you guys are right. If 7:30 comes along and the game starts, I will have to tune it to the game.
Well, I got tickets, so I'm leaving.
I understand. All right. Well, thank you again for coming to talk to us, and we'll talk again soon, I'm sure.
All right. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
So that was the UCP MLA for Airdrie Cochrane, Pete Guthrie, who again, yes, has been very candid on his thoughts. You got tickets. I don't care. I don't care. You're here with us.
I'm leaving. I'm out of here.
yeah, half the newsroom has tickets tonight, except you and I.
I've been locked in this chair since this thing started.
You're more important than me to this organization, I think.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but we'll see. So let's talk. We've got some time without a guest for a bit. You're a guest in a sense with Project Confederation.
Yeah.
So your organization is watching this pretty closely.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not a direct partisan organization, but what do you want to see out of things tonight?
Well, I think there's a lot of people, especially within our organization, that are frustrated with the status quo. we've had a lot of promises. We've had a lot of things that the Premier has indicated that he would be undertaking. Things like a provincial police force, pension plan. Not necessarily committed to those things, but I thought that we would be a lot further along in the process. Even regarding last year in March, the Supreme Court, when they ruled, or their decision that the carbon tax was in fact constitutional, overruling the Alberta Court of Appeals. That was another issue where Kenney said that he would be consulting with Albertans and he would be getting back to them. And that I don't know of any consultation. I didn't hear anything. And then even with the equalization resolution, right? Since that's been passed, nothing's happened. So we're in this kind of weird little position where, yeah, we've had a lot of talk from the Premier about things that he's going to do. And he's done a lot of good things. Like, he's done a lot of things that our organization can support. But in terms of finish, there hasn't been a lot of finish. There's been a lot of things that have been started. The Fair Deal panel's been started, but not a lot of finish. And that's something that it's made us frustrated. And if he does survive, which we'll see what happens tonight, but I'd like to see some improvement there. But if he doesn't, I would like to see an issues-based campaign where we can really play a role in defining what kind of a leader and what kind of a premier this province wants.
Yeah, well, and getting on to, I mean, the leadership race, if we have one, that's where, again, where are we going to be going with some of these issues? We're looking at a big frustration for a lot of us has been on the Ottawa front. It's been all talk, no action. There's Paul Hinman, who's offering the much more strong, independence option on the outside. So within the UCP, we'd be looking for somebody to take a regionalist view and a stronger approach that way. So, I mean, there's going to be so much to unfold. I mean, the party with the opportunity to redefine itself in this race is going to be, it really depends on who runs. And there's the thing, a lot of people have said, one of the strongest defenses for Jason Kenney so far, I wouldn't say strong, but the one most common is saying, well, who would replace him? And I mean, I guess everybody necessarily is keen on Danielle Smith, who said she would put her name forward, or Brian Jean. But you can't assume that nobody would come out of the woodworks. Nobody would show themselves to be a strong potential leader. I mean, we look at the federal race, and that's been interesting. Baber came out. He's virtually unknown across the country, known within Ontario, though. We think, oh boy, I got to admit, it was kind of a bit of an eye roll. Here's a guy, he's been kicked out of his caucus. Maybe he's a bit on the fringe. And no, he's proven himself to be quite reasonable and a solid candidate in that leadership. And nobody saw that coming. I don't know if he'll win it, but he's establishing himself as a very credible person. Likewise, Atchison, he's a solid contender who's staking out ground on that race and establishing himself within the Conservative Party. So those are names you never would have predicted a year ago that would run for the federal race. So you can't presume you would know who might come forward on the provincial front too. There might be federal politicians who decide to make the provincial hop if they think it would put them into a premier's chair. There's just so many things to guess on. But who runs? Of course, it's going to depend on what their platform is and where they want to stake their ground and why they would think they'd beat the others. We're really at a turning point. So we've rejigged our panel yet again. Derek's back here in the middle. Dave's.
I heard you guys were talking shit about me.
Yes.
I don't actually know what.
Yeah,
I just thought you guys
for a change. If you want to know, you'll have to want to watch one of our shows after.
I don't watch this crap.
Yeah, I don't blame. Yeah, and that wasn't too bad.
No, we've said much worse things about him
when they're not in the area.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So,
all right. So I've come back in because we're getting down pretty close to what when we're expecting the results. 10 minutes, according to the.
Well, there's been a change.
Oh God!
They've now taken down the 5:30 thing, and it's just up. It's just
it's just generic again.
I just came back in.
I know there was for no reason.
We do have a guest. You flipped my sheet on me here.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure we have anyone in the.
No, we've got some open time here where we can share our.
Well, we got Drew Barnes will be coming on.
Drew's going to be here in a bit, and we've certainly got lots to talk about. Come on.
Yeah.
I just go back today. I made this comment, Corey, on your show this morning. It is just so frustrating for the people of Alberta to have to go through this. Every single thing the UCP does is late.
Yes.
Their time is more important than our time.
And it's not just the whiny press. And the press are whiny all the time.
Sure.
But I don't think it's too much to ask that 1 in 10 media events starts on time. I think that's just showing professional courtesy.
Somewhere I heard that they'd pushed back the start of the counting from 9 o'clock, where they were supposed to start this morning, to 11 o'clock. Well, why doesn't somebody say, hey, you know what? There's a Battle of Alberta tonight. So why don't we make everybody happy and keep the counting starting at 9 and actually get done so people can get to the bars, they can get to the game, they can get to the Red Mile. But no, apparently there's not that kind of brain power.
Well, and aside from our annoyance with it, it is actually a little more serious. Like when you think about this, it's a sign of disrespect to the press. It's a sign of disrespect to people. Like this has been ongoing. When they're sitting watching at a conference, something important, whether it was a COVID update, whether it was some other breaking news, and you are constantly late like that. These are the little things, but they add up. These are the things that put impressions in people's head. And these are the things that sour voters. And times like now, they just can't seem to get that. As you said, they've had means to get this on time, and it looks like they're going to bounce it around on us again.
So I want to talk, we just had Paul Hinman on, leader of the Wild Rose Independence Party. I think a lot of people are going to be watching tomorrow morning what happens with that party in the event that Kenney managed to scrape by. If Kenney gets something in the 50s, which is quite possible, I think he'll probably try to stay. I mean, he said he'll stay, but we'll see. I think he'll try to stay. There'll probably be an attempt by the rebels in the caucus to force him out because he doesn't have the clear confidence of the party. It's ambiguous at that point. It's hard to lead a party in the 50s. If they fail, which I suspect there's a good chance they would, to fail to push him out at that point. I want to talk about, where do those people go? Are they going to go to the Wild Rose Independence Party as it is, or in some reconfigured form? Or do they go to something else entirely?
Well, we asked Paul Hinman that question a few minutes ago, and he said he would take time to consider it and talk to his board. And I think that's what all the dissenting MLAs will have to do. We've heard for the last 18 months about rebels in the caucus, and they're going to force this and they're going to force Kenney to do that, and they always back down. They never follow through with their threats. I think we're going to have to be staking out the McDougall Center tomorrow and getting these guys going in and getting them coming out.
Now, I missed most of the interview with Paul, but did he talk about the possibility of opening up the leadership, having a leadership race within the Wild Rose in the event that Kenney stays on?
I don't think we got to that, did we? Correct?
No, he didn't imply anything of the sort, though, on that end. I did get a hint that he has been in communication with some MLAs, and it's more of a, we'll see what happens after tonight sort of a.
Everybody's keeping their musket dry, right? They don't want to say anything that's going to get them in trouble before the results are announced. Tomorrow's the interesting day. When the results are out there, okay, now what are you going to do?
Well, that's in the event Kenney gets over 50%.
Yeah.
If he's below, then
it's
actually Alberta politics gets a bit more simple.
Yeah, but then the question remains: are you going to run for the leadership? There's questions for MLAs either way this goes.
So one of the key things I've heard from MLAs in discussing the what if scenario, Kenney scrapes by tonight. He gets 55, whatever it is. A large number of them do seem to view the Wild Rose Independence Party as the place to try to build a new base from, particularly in rural and small town Alberta. But they have generally said that they want a leadership race if that happens. They all seem to generally like Paul, but believe that if they're going to go there, that party is going to kind of go to the next level. They'll go from one of those small parties with no seats, not a lot of money. If it's going to move into contention, if it's really going to move into center stage here, they're going to want a leadership race. What do you think the chances are that Paul be willing to do that? He did it once as a Wild Rose leader before the time that Danielle Smith ran. He
stepped aside when he thought it would be better for the party to have Danielle take over at that point. He'd worked very hard to win that leadership at that time and won that by-election in an upset later on. So I'm not, but I mean, it's a different environment now and it's a different time. I mean, he's really held on, and this party isn't as much on the rise as the Wild Rose was at that point. Ironically, Paul left while it was on the upward swing. The Wild Rose Independence right now is kind of static.
Just look how much money they raised in the last quarter.
Not much.
It wasn't a lot. couple $1,000.
But I mean, he's a pragmatist to understand. If you've suddenly got a caucus, you're going to get more profile. You're going to get a research budget. You're going to get questions, in the legislature, even if you're not the leader. So that would bring the party up a level potentially. But then the other aspect is you only need 4 MLAs sitting in the legislature to form an official party, and they could bypass.
Yeah.
But then you have no constituency basis.
I think one guy we're going to want to ask a lot of these questions is our next guest, Drew Barnes. Let's welcome Drew Barnes. He is the independent MLA for Cypress Medicine Hat, first elected as a Wild Rose MLA in 2012, reelected under the Wild Rose in 2015, and then reelected a third time under the United Conservative banner, possibly for the last time as a United Conservative member in the 2019 provincial election. How are you doing, Drew?
Oh, Derek, I'm great. Thanks for talking to me. Nice to see you, Dave and Corey, guys.
So we don't have the results yet. We don't know when we're going to get them, for God's sakes. So we're really just in speculation mode here, but there's so much speculating to do. So I think that's where I want to start with you. I think obviously I know what result you're probably hoping for tonight, which is for United Conservative Party members to vote to remove Jason Kenney. That would trigger a new leadership race. Do you see yourself and Todd Lawton potentially returning to the United Conservative Party if that happens, or has that ship sailed and you guys looking towards greener pastures regardless of tonight's result?
Well, I certainly am hesitant to speak for Todd, but absolutely for myself, I will not return to the UCP under Jason Kenney's leadership. I have some concerns about the UCP in general to be the proper vehicle to really represent economic freedom, individual opportunity conservatives. One of the failures of Jason Kenney's leadership that we almost never talk about is how voices that wanted economic freedom, lower taxes, more choice in public programs weren't heard at all. And he had zero empathy for people that wanted to put those things forward. So one step at a time, but I expect him to survive tonight, and then I expect politics to get very interesting.
Okay, so you expect him to survive, and that's where I want to take this conversation. That's where all the really interesting what ifs come. If he loses, well, we're going to have a race, and the United Conservative Party's coalition probably stays more or less together. There has been some significant fraying along the edges, but I think that the chances of that party remaining at least vaguely united goes up. If he stays, though, I think any reasonable observer expects there to be a bloodletting, and that the United Conservative Party will become a bit of a misnomer. The constituent parts that made up that party are no longer going to be a single piece. I can't see them staying united behind Jason Kenney. In the event that happens, we were talking about some of the scenarios here. Do the rebels, disproportionately, although not exclusively from rural Alberta in the caucus, are they going to go to maybe some reformed version of the Wild Rose Independence Party? Are they going to? Do you think they're likely to form something completely new? What form do you think this is going to take? And I know you're only speaking for yourself, so I won't ask you to name any others in it. I know you're clear you don't want to speak for anyone else, but for yourself and in general for the other rebels still inside that caucus, what form do you think that movement is going to take?
Well, thanks for that. Well, first of all, absolutely, UCP members that are not satisfied with Jason Kenney's leadership should leave and should start a movement. Look at how they have manipulated the two nomination contests where hundreds of local members tried to hold their MLAs accountable, get involved in the process, and they were unable to do that. So anybody who thinks that a Jason Kenney-led UCP party isn't going to have its fingers on so many of the things that should be exclusively for the members and exclusively for Albertans is making a mistake. So they need to leave for that reason. A couple other things, Derek. I know you guys hate to talk about Rachel Notley and the NDP on this show, but if Jason Kenney wins, she'll be the happiest person in Alberta. even way back to when the 5 or 6 of them were caught on the Sky Palace patio drinking. The NDP went light on Jason Kenney and the UCP because they want to run against Jason Kenney. Janet Brown, I'm so glad you have her. She's one of the best pollsters in all of Alberta. She has consistently shown that Jason Kenney has little chance of beating Rachel Notley and the NDP next time, if any chance. And that is why Jason Kenney needs to go, and that's why MLAs have to do something different. Peter Guthrie mentioned, I think, that the UCP only has about $1 million and a half, and the NDP, I think, is north of $5 million. That's the other thing that's crazy about this situation. 17 or 20,000 Albertans were going to go to Red Deer. The UCP party was going to generate $2 million. They could have easily paid for more voting mechanisms to continue with the live voting, but all that money was returned. The Premier's leadership team has spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on get out the vote and identifying votes in this process, money that should have been saved for our main battle, our real battle against the NDP come May 29th, 2023. So that's what I'm focused on. And, Jason Kenney has clearly lost the trust and the confidence of Albertans, and that's why change is necessary, however it has to come.
So I appreciate that, Drew, but I guess I want to restate my question. I know you believe that if Jason Kenney remains as leader, that UCP members and voters should consider leaving towards alternative options. But I want to ask you a bit. What do you see as those alternative options? Where, what are the main options? I think that that you're looking at, or that you see as plausible outcomes for what form the rebellion takes if Kenney holds on to the leadership of the party.
Okay, let's start there. Thank you, Derek. Well, you notice that I was ejected from the UCP caucus. The Premier spoke lots at that meeting about why I had to go the same day that Todd Loewen was. Up to that point, I had never, ever called for Premier Kenney's resignation. And when he did have good policy, I'll give you an example. When the COVID restrictions were regional, I said, I think he's got it about as right as he can. When he did some illogical things like cost taxpayers $8 million, caused 70,000 AISH recipients hardship by trying to move their payments into another calendar year, which showed a low level of understanding. I said, no, I think he's got it wrong. I don't see the logic in this. He always said at that point in time he welcomed open disagreement and debate, and my reward was being ejected. So Derek, you notice since then, that 6 or 8, maybe even 10 other UCP MLAs have spoke up even stronger than I used to before I was kicked out. And 3 or 4 of them have called for his resignation, and they haven't been kicked out. And that's because I believe he is fearful of what I think is the best way to go forward. That's with a conservative movement that represents all parts of Alberta. I'm going to come back to that in a minute, but a new conservative party that is truly here to get back to our 10% flat tax and the 2% small business tax for rural people, enshrine property rights. Those are the things that have to happen. And you notice again that, I think it's at least 6 MLAs have called for his resignation and criticized him loudly and haven't been ejected. And that's because as soon as there's 3 of us, Alberta Elections recognizes us as a new provincial party, if we so register, and we can run in all 87 constituencies. If there's 4 of us, as Corey Morgan correctly said a short time ago, all of a sudden our taxpayer support goes way up in the legislature. And I mean, Todd and I have a great team now and great support, but it would be that much magnified, and we could be that much better of an opposition for Albertans. Danielle Smith, Derek alluded to it. One of the things that I've talked to a lot of Albertans about is maybe it's time to look at things different. We should be the freest and most prosperous place in all North America. By any estimates, our oil and gas business is only at 15% of what it could be productivity wise. We know that in exchange for paying billions of dollars of equalization, we still don't get resource movement from our Canadian partners. So maybe one of the things that we should look at is a coalition government, a conservative party that represents Calgary and Edmonton, and a rural conservative party that represents the rest of Alberta, and caucuses separately, caucuses jointly. One of the real good things about what the Western Standard's done, what people did moving their money out of their bank accounts in response to Trudeau's Emergency Act, is Albertans more than ever are telling me that they want to put in the time, effort, and take some risk and push for change. And let's see where that goes.
I'm just wondering, have you been speaking then, I guess, directly with any of the people across? I mean, I know you still socialize. It's always been the nature of MLAs, even between NDP and Conservatives. It's not always as abrasive as it is in question period as we tend to see from outside. But I understand you can't break confidences, but has there been some discussion on, again, theoretical scenarios with MLAs who are currently sitting in the other side of the aisle from you?
Oh, absolutely. I've talked to lots of my former colleagues in the UCP. You got to give them so much credit. I mean, it's tough to know the best way forward, but the conversations always center and start around what is the best for my constituents, what's the best for Alberta. We're in that green zone now where we're only a year away from the election, and it's time to make those decisions. And then, I think it does start tonight with the official results of the leadership review. But clearly, we've spent a lot of time, coffee, talking, going for walks, and a lot of us share the same values. There's a lot of note passing that goes on in the legislature. And when somebody has a question or a member statement that I think really hits to the heart of economic freedom or individual opportunity for Albertans, I will quite often pass them a note and say, way to go. I'm so glad you taught me something or highlighted that. So yeah, there's been lots of discussions, but we'll see where it goes tonight, and hope, we'll do everything we can to keep Albertans' best interests in mind.
Yeah, so looking ahead, let's, again, we're always just, all we can do is speculate till they get around with sharing their results with us. But presuming a leadership race does happen, the party rejuvenates, there's still some core issues that are a problem. It's sort of, as you pointed out, maybe something of a coalition with other parties, or maybe changing the party structure so that there isn't the regional division going on within the party, rural versus urban MLAs, things like that. Like, are there party reforms you would like to see that perhaps could make it more functional if it was coming into a new leadership?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, sure, it could be done within the UCP, but as long as the leadership and the board of directors, has that goal, and we have the mechanism to make it happen. Corey, one of the best examples is, I believe it was called the Reform Act that the Federal Conservative Party of Canada had. Aaron O'Toole flip-flopped on the carbon tax, flip-flopped, I think, on the gun registry, turned out to be not the conservative that he campaigned for. So I give the conservative MPs credit for saying, hey, this isn't what you sold us. So it's time to move on. So a rejuvenation of the UCP would have to include, I think, something like the Reform Act. I think one of the big mistakes that both Brian Jean and the Jason Kenney and the formation of the UCP from the Conservative and the Wild Rose Party made was not having a mechanism for leadership review, and they're right to start with. Many of our good grassroots members who share their time and their ideas, for the betterment of Alberta, not for pay, at first realized there wasn't a mechanism for a leadership review. So when they felt that Jason Kenney hadn't met expectations, they spent 6 or 8 months fighting just to get the idea of a leadership review started. Let's not make those mistakes again. Let's put in a grassroots driven process that will allow members from all parts of Alberta to have their say. And let's focus on the, some of the things that Alberta really needs. A written constitution is exactly the highest thing on my list, because it will give us a way to put our culture more in writing. It will give us a way to limit the growth of government. Heaven forbid we ever end up in a COVID situation again. It'll give a way for MLAs and Albertans to have a greater say. we got to have meaningful recall. We have to have meaningful citizen initiative referendums. The laws that Jason Kenney put in are the bars are so high it'll never happen. And as I mentioned, something like the Conservative Party of Canada has, where we have to have meaningful checks and balances on the leadership of the party. Otherwise, why would we go down this route again?
Drew, one quick question about yourself. We're a year away from the election. Are you going to run as an independent, or what does your future party status hold?
Oh, Dave, thanks for that question. Yeah, you know, I've had a lot of constituents, a lot of Albertans say, yeah, run as an independent. Wouldn't a loose group of independents be good? And of course, there's me and Todd, you know, the 5 or 6 other MLAs that have expressed concern, Danielle Smith. You know, it's an idea worth talking about. And again, I believe Albertans, as much as I've seen them since the early formation of the reform days, are in the situation where they want to talk about this, they want to take risks, they want to drive for change. So thanks, Dave, for your question. I believe I have the energy, the desire, and the support to run as an independent. My preference is though to run in a way that ensures Alberta will be the freest and most prosperous place in North America. And I guess I've got probably the next 3 to 6 months to evaluate that.
Are you got a number in mind tonight that you think the Premier will hit?
You know, I wanted to stay away from that, but first of all, I've long thought that if he felt he was going to lose after all the voter ID and the outreach to Albertans he's done, he'd have somehow twisted and turned again. You know, we were all supposed to be in Red Deer on April 9th. We were all willing to, you know, spend a day, spend $110 and get there and do it. And those rules changed. So I believe that if he thought he was going to lose tonight, he would change again. So my number, Dave, is 57%. And where it comes from is this. I believe he was going to lose in Red Deer 10,000 to 5,000, and that would have been the end of it. I understand that all of a sudden the membership went from 29,000 to about 60,000. So some side of 31,000 more members. A lot of rural people stopped selling memberships because they honorably, if the person couldn't go to Red Deer on April 9th, they didn't ask them overly hard to get involved in the process. So I believe those last 30,000 memberships come from, you know, an area where, you know, while they come from an area where the votes are going to come, if 15,000 of those people vote, I'm giving 10,000 to yes and 5,000 to no. And that's why I think he's going to get in the high 50s.
And the most important question tonight, Flames or Oilers?
Oh, it's a hard one. My 22-year-old son goes to the U of C, and him and I go to the odd Calgary game together, and that is a wonderful hockey team. But I went to the U of A, and I used to watch Wayne Gretzky and Glenn Anderson and Boyk and that Paul Coffey he used to skate. So slight preference for the Oilers.
Okay, Nico, can we cut him off at this particular motion? All right, Derek, back to you.
So I was going to take a little longer of a break than this, but I've popped in our Rachel Emanuel on the ground, our Alberta legislative reporter. She is on the ground at the Kenney. I'm not allowed to even say where it is. This is in a bunker, undisclosed bunker in southern Alberta somewhere. Party officials are telling her right now that the vote is still expected any minute. They're not publicly putting it up on the stream, but we need to be standing by. The result is coming imminently.
Well, I'll believe that when I see it.
Could be hours. Could be hours.
It looks like Rachel in the lobby right now.
Actually, let's bring Rachel up right now for an update. Nico, if we can also get just the mic in my ear brought down a bit. But let's go to Rachel Emanuel at an undisclosed location in Calgary, where Jason Kenney and some of his supporters have gathered to have the results come in. Rachel, what are they telling you?
Yeah, they're still expecting the results at any minute. As I said before, it was supposed to be at 5:30. I just asked for another update. They said any minute. I think these things tend to usually run quite late, so I won't be surprised if we're still waiting for a really long time. But I'm hearing any minute, so I'm going to hold out and hope that that's the case.
Okay, we're actually, I'm getting word here. I've got several solid sources saying the results are going to come at 6:15.
6:15. Okay,
But we are the
wow.
Western Standard. I think we can beat it.
Well, you go work your sources.
Well,
man.
work your sources. Work your sources.
I think personally that James in the newsroom pool, he's got Thursday. I think he might have the inside track.
So far, he's on track. But we've got Dave Prisco, communications director of the party, saying 6:15, and that's a media advisory. But I would say that means something. This is the UCP.
Incompetent vote counters.
So, Rachel, what's the mood like there?
Everyone seems pretty excited. I've asked a couple people if they've managed to hear anything about the results. Everyone says they haven't, or at least they're not willing to disclose to me that they have. There's pretty loud music playing. There's lots of food. Media is kind of hidden in like a back corner, so I can't actually go mingle with anyone or ask anyone any questions, which is quite unfortunate. But it just honestly seems like a pretty big party right now.
This is obviously an invitation-only event. I was actually quite shocked that we were able to get you in there. Is there much media there?
There's quite a bit of media here. Yeah, there's a lot of people here.
Okay. And what size crowd is it? I know it's a hand-picked crowd for the premier. It's not a general party event with everyone allowed to come. It's a hand-picked crowd. About how many people?
I honestly couldn't say because basically when I came in, they had me register at the media table and then quickly shuffled me into a back room. Maybe like 100 or 200 people, but I'm notoriously bad at estimating crowd sizes, so let's not hold me to that.
So you, if I'm not mistaken, I think in all likeliness, you had the last interview with Jason Kenney, possibly as premier, but at the very least, the last interview with Jason Kenney before he learns his fate in theoretically half an hour from now. Tell us about that interview. How is he feeling? Is it? I know he says he thinks he's going to win, but did you get the sense he's just kind of putting on a brave face, or does he seem genuinely confident?
Yeah, exactly. I think it might have been the last interview. I spoke to him in Washington, D.C. yesterday, just after he finished testifying at the U.S. Senate committee. And then both him and I rushed off to the airport. We actually ended up being on the same plane all the way back from Washington to Calgary. So that was quite fun. I'm sure he was very glad to see me. But he seemed fairly optimistic, but he kind of coded everything that he said with saying, maybe it won't be the results that I'm hoping for. He said in politics and in elections, there's always surprises. So I don't think someone would have kind of coded their phrase saying that if they were 100% sure they had the win. So it's kind of just like a safe fail. So if you end up losing, you said, well, I did acknowledge that there's always room, there's always space for things to go awry in these types of situations. So maybe he is questioning it a little bit, maybe he's wondering, he's doubting. I wouldn't say he was 100% confident when I spoke to him yesterday. You could see some cracks in the facade, I would say.
Rachel, sorry, Corey's chuckling at me. He understands the technical error I just bumbled my way into. I think I'm having to nominate myself for the Starfish. It's the only award that I'm eligible for.
I think if you probably hit the power button, it may come on again.
There's a password. Corey's going to pull my chestnuts out of the fire in a second here. So, did Kenney give you an idea of what level of support he is realistically expecting?
He said he expects a strong mandate, but he's also said repeatedly that he's going to stay on even if he receives 50% plus one of the vote. So I think he's kind of setting himself up for expectation that he's going to stay on even if he does receive a small mandate, while saying he expects yet a big one.
Is he expecting? Did he talk a bit about the bloodletting that's expected in the event that he has a slim majority, but not enough? Did he talk about what he's going to do to try and take back party control?
No, he didn't mention anything about that. He largely just said, if I get 50% plus one, that's a majority. I'm going to stay on as leader. I'm going to consider that a mandate to continue staying on as leader of the UCP.
Rachel, it's Dave here. Well, these two guys try and figure out a 20-year-old computer. Could you just give us a rundown on what exactly happened in Washington? Who did Kenney speak to? What exactly you did?
Sure. So on day one, I met up with Kenney on Monday at a media roundtable in Washington, D.C. He had met with various officials from the State Department that day. His whole reason for going there is basically to pitch Albertan energy and oil. Apparently, in Washington, D.C., they don't understand that most of their energy does come from Alberta and that it's clean energy. So currently in the U.S., we're seeing energy crisis and gasoline prices are skyrocketing. But the Biden administration is going to OPEC looking for ways to fill that energy. And Kenney is saying, why don't you come here to Alberta? We want you to invest in Albertan oil, ultimately with the hopes of getting another pipeline built. Not sure if that's something that we can expect to see happen under the Biden administration. Remember, he did cancel the Keystone XL pipeline as one of his very first acts after he took office. And then Tuesday, he actually went and testified at the U.S. Senate committee. So that went quite well for him. There was also, Natural Resource Minister Jonathan Wilkinson was testifying, but U.S. senators didn't seem super interested in asking him any follow-up questions. They primarily were interested in talking to Kenney, who was specifically offering them a solution to their need of the energy crisis, whereas the federal minister actually spoke a little bit more on the work their government's doing on decarbonization and emissions reductions. Later, I wrote a piece about that when I spoke to Kenney. I asked him about that, because on Monday he said every time the federal government talks about energy, we talk about emissions reductions, they aren't a champion for Albertan oil. I think we saw that again at the committee on Tuesday. Jonathan Wilkinson did not champion Albertan oil. He did not speak about the work that Alberta is doing on energy and the emissions reductions that they have done. But Kenney was definitely a champion for that. I think it went really well for him. I think it was, a good setup for him ahead of today's vote. He also said to me that he thought the fact even he went to Washington, D.C. showed that he wasn't being distracted by his leadership review. He said he hasn't spent too much time on it. That being said, I'm sure he has quite a number of staff working on it. Obviously, a bunch of people have taken leave of absence from the government of Alberta positions to work on the campaign. So there's definitely people that have been busy working on it.
Well, we're going to talk to someone who has spent a lot of time on Kenney's leadership review in 1 second here. Thank you very much, Rachel. Please keep us posted with anything you hear. Just send us text and whatnot. We're going to make sure we bring you in as we get closer to expecting the results. So keep us in the loop. Stand by. We're obviously going to come to you more than once tonight.
Sure. Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. So one man who has... I got a rumor.
Oh, what's the rumor?
Okay, I'm not going to report this yet. It's just not. It's not solid enough. But let's just say it would make you happy.
Oh well, I would like
That's
to be happy.
all I can say.
I would like to be happy.
And so we're not taking that one to the bank yet. Let's just hold on to what I've got there. So David Parker has been
which camera am I looking at?
That one.
Right
that one.
Okay.
David Parker has been a leader in the Take Back Alberta movement. It's the largest of the different, let's just say, get rid of Kenney movements. There's the Brian Jean movement. Take Back Alberta, I think it's fair to say, is disproportionately former Kenney supporters, and then kind of really bringing in a lot of the anti-mandatory vaccination and lockdown movement, kind of bringing that into it. You've really been working on the movement to replace Jason Kenney as leader of the United Conservative Party for quite some time, as one of the key organizers of it. What are you expecting to see tonight? Both in general, give me your reasoning. As Jenna Brown said, people on both sides give predictions, but people on the get rid of Kenney side tend to give a lot more reasoning and logic around it. What's your prediction, and how do you get to that prediction?
So I'm going to make a bold prediction, but I think he's going to get somewhere between 38 and 43%.
Sorry.
Jason Kenney will get somewhere between 38 and 43%.
Okay.
So the no vote will get somewhere in the range of 62 to 57. Okay. And the reason that I believe that is if you look at the numbers, just the raw data, almost 70% of the list, I think it's something like 62% of the list is in rural Alberta. And most of that list is women all over this province. Even I heard a rumor, this is just a rumor, but that Rick Orman was surprised by the number of women that were voting in this leadership review. And like the truth of the matter is, as conservatives, you and I have been working in conservative politics or in the conservative ecosystem, let's call it, for a while. You don't see a lot of young mothers engaged, but they're really engaged right now. And I think when you look at the numbers with such a high percentage in rural, then on top of the fact that I believe Deloitte has disqualified. I can't confirm this, but I believe they disqualified those 4,000 that were bought with the single credit cards. Or at very least, I do not believe that a lot of those votes came in. From what I've heard from people who were there, counting the ballots, like processing them, they did not see a lot of ballots coming in mass amounts. So I guess I would say that I believe pretty wholeheartedly Jason Kenney's going to lose. And I believe that it's going to be way more than people think. I also think that a lot of his polling data, the data that he's relying on to say, well, this is how much I'm going to win by. I think there's people that are perhaps not telling him their real intentions when they're being called. And I think that perhaps that data is a little bit skewed. And I just point out mathematically that for every person who tells him they're supporting him that actually doesn't, that's a 2-point swing, right? They're voting against him, not for him. So it's not just one vote. It's when you're polling, that's actually quite a skew.
I'm just making sure the camera cannot see my phone here. So when my secret sources light up, we're not ousting any. So my source is watching at home right now. I know some of you are. If my phone lights up with your name on it, it's not going to show up on any camera angle that we have.
No.
All right, so you're predicting a blowout.
Yeah.
I would have predicted a blowout if it went forward with a Red Deer based on the information I saw, none of which came from you.
No.
It definitely looked like a blowout. I think that, choosing a whole new ball game as they did, I think it's given Kenney much more of a chance. I wouldn't be surprised if he makes it out tonight, but I think on balance of probabilities he doesn't. What does your organization, what does your movement do in the event that he squeaks by with something like 55?
If he gets 55, I'm firmly of the belief that means that he somehow cheated. I'm not sure how. We've looked at every different way in which he could have. There's obviously cheating in the fact that he changed the rules. So like when you're playing a game, like say you're playing Monopoly with Emma, right?
I want to play Risk.
And you're like, you flip the board over and you say, we're playing Risk now.
Yeah.
She's going to be like, Daddy, why are you cheating? Right? And any child knows that when you change the game you're playing, that's cheating. So he's already admitted that he's a cheater.
Well, he hasn't admitted it. He's just admitted he changed the game.
Well, yeah. So he hasn't admitted it himself, but I think it's fair to say he's he did something that would be normally considered cheating. But I will say this. I think he's going to have the dignity to resign. I think a lot of what he's doing is just political, right? It's like, I've got to go out there and I've got to rally the troops. I've got to give them morale. But at the end of the day, I think he knows that if less than 75% of your own party doesn't think you should stay on.
There's 0% chance of that. That's not happening. There's no way he's getting 75 or more. I mean,
no, I know. And that's what I'm saying. That's what you need in any normal world, in any place where, where we lived in the past, in any context before that. 77 was considered bad. Wasn't that the curse in Alberta? You know this better than
75,
me.
75 was considered a terrible number. It means you got to be premier for one more year.
Yeah.
That's what it meant.
That was it.
Or not even a year normally.
We got the coming in at
they said expected at 5:15. 6:15, sorry. Yeah. Okay, so they're sticking to that number.
Well, they stick to 5:30 pretty good until it got to 5:29.
I do a cynic, Dave.
Yes, very much so. Thank you for. I will give you a piece of advice. I'll take Ukraine.
Take Ukraine
in
risk.
On risk, yeah.
It's a very valuable.
You can have Ukraine. Ukraine is weak. That's what you're supposed to say. I'm from Ukraine. Ukraine not weak.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know that one. There you go. Sorry.
Seinfeld.
He doesn't know a Seinfeld.
I don't know my Seinfeld.
All right, doesn't know a Seinfeld.
If Josh was here, he would have handled that.
I think have we got someone else waiting in the stream to bring into it? I don't know. I think yes. Yes. No. Okay. No.
Well, I have a question for you, Derek. So
so you're the host now. Okay.
No. Just a brief question. How long do you think it's going to go beyond 6:15?
Well, that's a tougher question than picking Kenney makes it or not. You never know with the UCP. An hour. I think Andrew, you go through a lot more press conferences than I do, Dave. What's an average? Half an hour?
Normally, Kenny's 20 minutes late.
Normally 20.
20,
but this is a big thing.
Yeah, but this is not a normal press.
Well, remember your prediction. If it was early, that was a sign, was probably good news. Kenny wants to get out. He wants to get the 5 o'clock news, the 6 o'clock news.
75%.
Send his people out, go enjoy the other Battle of Alberta. If it's late, then bad news. And we are now, they gave a window of 4 to 6.
Yeah,
we're 5:59. They're now saying it's going to be 6:15 after the window.
It's disgraceful. It's
but in terms of what our voodoo predictions were, that if it's late on the later end between 4 and 6, then it's bad news. We're 6 o'clock
6
on the
o'clock,
dot.
so
it's not
it was
coming until
supposed to be
at
in this-
least 6:15. So by at least our the logic we're using of a late result, that bodes poorly for Kenney. I kind of think of like a jury. If the jury comes back right away, you're getting the chair. If the jury takes a long time, you might be innocent. I think it's kind of the reverse here. If the jury takes a long time, Kenney gets the chair.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's certainly not excited about the news because I think we've all heard from a number of sources that he does know. So I think there is one person, at very least in the province, who knows right now, and it's Jason Kenney.
Maybe me. I don't know if I know. Because
aren't you going to kick yourself in the ass if
we don't break what's what I have right now? I don't know. I might know. I don't know if I know. It's the known unknowns.
I will remind you that you were the very first to break Erin O'Toole.
Yeah, we did
in the country. Yeah.
Did we? Were we also?
You're also the first ever to live tweet a caucus meeting.
That was true.
That was a great day.
We need to do that tomorrow.
That was almost a year ago.
Did we
that was
break
more
Andrew
than a year
Scheer
ago.
too? Did we also break Andrew Scheer, Con?
I don't think so.
No.
I know we were Erin O'Toole.
Yeah, we did break it. The Erin O'Toole. That was good. Okay, I think we might have someone else in the lobby here. Okay, we're going to go to them in just a minute.
No, that's not working.
Our producer is going to set it up so that I can. I can't move down there. We're more high tech than we used to be, but not as high tech as we try to lead you to think at home. We're doing our best, folks. Okay, well, Nico is going to bring our next guest into the stream. I don't know who it is, but he assures me it's a good guest. Surprise guest. The mystery pundit. Let's bring him in.
Oh.
Everybody's
favorite pollster.
We could do worse than Janet Brown. So Janet, I was just channeling you. David was giving his predictions, and I was trying to paraphrase you earlier that the anti-Kenney side tend to have at least some reasoning and logic behind it, whereas the supporters of Kenney, we had a supporter of Kenney on, very, very smart guy, but the argument largely boils down to, well, he's never lost, and so he probably won't lose again. And that was true of Rome for a long time. It was a very good bet for a very long time, but, eventually people like me showed up.
Yeah.
True. A lot of you.
Some of our reasoning tonight in terms of predicting when this is going to come was if it's an early result, it's probably good news for Jason Kenney. Sort of like a jury. If the jury comes back right away, you're probably getting the chair. If they take a long time, maybe you're good. I think it's sort of that in reverse, that if it takes a long time, then the premier might be trying to collect himself for what's happening. Maybe I'm reading too much into it.
Well, I mean, the big reason I agreed to come back at 6 o'clock was because I thought we'd get to be talking about results. Right?
Have you ever tried to go attend to a UCP press conference on time?
Oh, no. But this is different, right? This is not a press conference. This is the premier's future. All of the 6 o'clock news programs just started 3 minutes ago. If this guy was going to win, he had an opportunity to start the 6 o'clock newscast, with his arms in the air saying congratulations. So if Jason Kenney is going to pull off 50%, it's just these guys get your act together and be ready to have that victory lap on the 6 o'clock news. So, I think reading the tea leaves, I think maybe they're postponing this because the news isn't good. If it is good, it just speaks to incompetence that they weren't ready to go for 6 o'clock.
So I've got sources who are giving me answers that would make guys like David Parker from Take Back Alberta here very happy tonight. But I'm not going to tip my hand much beyond that because I really it's not solid enough yet. But I would, if the premier had a good result tonight, I expect he would have gone earlier. So we had Paul Hinman on earlier, leader of the Wild Rose Independence Party. We had Drew Barnes on. He's talking vaguely. He more or less indicated that regardless of the result tonight, he's actually not very interested in going back to the United Conservative Party, that there's more fundamental problems with the party than just Jason Kenney. Where do you think this goes tonight? If in the scenario we're kind of using as a 55%, Jason Kenney gets his bare majority and decides to stay, and he's going to fight the rebels out, and there's, I think conservatively speaking, 4 to 6 out, possibly more. Again, I'm very much in the business of wild speculation, so I'm asking you to reasoning behind your speculation.
Okay, I'm going to restate something that I've said several times this week. Jason Kenney won the last election with 55% support from the general public. We are sitting here wondering whether he can get 55% support with his base. So even if he gets a winning number, this premier is in such a weakened position going into the next election that, that's got to concern conservatives, even those who support him. So now back to your question. Why do I, how do I look at the predictions? So I've talked to lots of people and I've asked them all what they thought. And then I asked them not just what number they think is we're going to hear tonight, but why. And I just seen this pattern where people who are predicting a majority vote don't really have a good logical reason for that. And people who are predicting a loss do have a logical reason. People who are predicting a loss have a spreadsheet. They talk to me about how many people were going to go to Red Deer. They talk about how many rural voters there were on the voting list. They talk about how disappointing the voter turnout has looked. 60,000 members. We're talking about maybe, I think we're expecting 32,000 votes were counted. So the people who are expecting I'm not making a prediction whether he's going to get above or below 50%. I'm just saying that the people I talk to who are making a losing prediction are giving me better logic than the people expecting a winning vote.
So I want to go to the day after tomorrow kind of scenario. Kenney scrapes by. Do you see in this event? Okay, we've got now Drew Barnes, Todd Lowen, let's say roughly 6 others. That's going to include a guy like Brian Jean. You might have outside of the caucus someone like Danielle Smith. You've got the Wild Rose Independence Party, possibly just a totally other new party around. What do you think the chances of success are of a party kind of launching an insurgency from the Tories' right flank? Do you think there's enough anger at Jason Kenney to sustain that with some kind of success? Maybe not the government, but to at least a large showing? Or is, despite the anger at Jason Kenney out there, the fear of a vote split too great that no matter how unpopular Kenney is, people will hold their nose and vote for him?
Well, it's going to be a very delicate balance. Derek, you'll remember this. When they were putting the PCs and the Wild Rose together, I was one of those analysts who said, this is never going to hold. And lo and behold, Jason Kenney put these two parties together, and he kept the peace for quite some time. So my prediction ended up being right, but it took a long time for it to be right. My prediction that there's no way these people could get along, it eventually became true, but it took longer than I thought. So whatever new leader we have, they're going to face the same challenge as Jason Kenney, this very delicate balance for this big ticket, this big tent party. So if the winning candidate for the leadership review comes from the far right of the party, then it's going to be really hard to keep sort of the more traditional progressive conservatives in the tent. And, we're in a different environment this year than we were in 2019. In 2019, when I was out there doing focus groups and polling, people would tell me all the time, I like Rachel Notley, but she's got a weak team around her. Now centrists are telling me, I like Rachel Notley, and man, she's attracting a lot of interesting candidates. So, a candidate from the far right wing may bring certain people back into the party, but they'll have to work really hard to make sure that they don't lose those traditional progressive conservatives, because the math you need, we found out in 2015, when the right is divided, there's the perfect storm for the NDP to win. So the math will hold in the next election as well. If the right can't come together, Rachel Notley and the left, they're too strong to be underestimated right now.
Okay, we're going to be bringing Corey Morgan back in a minute, but I just got a last question for David. We're going to bring David back in after we're expecting results. Geez, sounds like Groundhog Day. But I mean, the second expected time for results is coming up in just 5 minutes.
I expected these results on April 9th. What are you talking about?
Janet wins line of the night.
That was great. That is the line of the night for sure.
So yeah, Janet wins so far for punditry wit. I was watching The Edge of Tomorrow last night. It's sort of like a futuristic war version of Groundhog Day, and Tom Cruise is reliving the same day over and over until he gets the battle exactly right. I feel like that's been the Kenney Leadership Review vote now. But I'll come back to you. I had a question. You didn't answer my question exactly, though. What is next for Take Back Alberta if Kenney stays? He gets 55. You know, some guys are purged. There's a bit of a bloodletting, but he doesn't go. What are you guys going to do?
Well, we've contemplated this a lot, and there are vehicles at our disposal, including this new Buffalo Party. The APP is looking into doing things. I think if Jason Kenney somehow remains on after getting such a tiny fraction of his own membership, right, which proves that he's not going to be able to win a general election, we have to move to a new vehicle. So that would be the only option after that would be to start a new party, which there are parties there waiting. And you know, Take Back Alberta is all about civic engagement. So basically, we'd be teaching Albertans how to build a political party really fast.
Yeah. Well, I know you guys certainly shocked, the Kenney team. They just didn't see you guys coming. After the AGM, they thought that the half dozen people who ran against them on the executive were the resistance, and that really let their guard down. In the meantime, you guys were.
We went hard, yeah.
Well, you guys were swimming through the water with a knife clenched between your teeth. And you guys popped up, and a week later they changed the whole voting system. So
yes.
you guys have really upset Alberta politics, and so we're going to want to come back into you.
Okay, yeah. Well, let's get Corey on here.
So, but before we bring Corey in, we're going to go back to Janet. Janet, do you see any way forward for Kenney if he scrapes by the skin of his teeth here? Do you see any real way for him to reconcile at least with enough of the rebels in the caucus and enough of the rebels in the general membership? And I suppose those might be two separate questions. Do you see a way for him to reconcile himself to pull this back together if he, slips by with, something in the mid-50s?
Well, I've given a few presentations to my clients recently, and the message I'm trying to leave everybody with is that all scenarios are on the table. Now, Jason Kenney, in my polling, I got him down at 19% approval at one point, which is the low water mark in my 25-year history in doing polling in Alberta. So if a guy can go from 19% to running in the next election, it will be miraculous. But there is a scenario for Jason Kenney to come together. And as I see it, the public is really just fed up with all of this infighting. And that even if most members of the public would like to see Jason Kenney go tonight, if he does survive tonight, I think the average Albertan is just going to say, UCP, get along, let's move forward. So if Jason Kenney can unite the party, if the economy stays strong, if we don't have any sort of surprise flare-ups of COVID, new variations of COVID, I do see a path for victory for Jason Kenney. It's a lot easier to play out Rachel Notley as the next premier of Alberta than it is to play out Jason Kenney. But I can play it out if the economy cooperates, and if those centrist Albertans just say, you know what, the NDP is a step too far for me.
Just heard David Parker of Take Back Alberta say if Kenney stays, then he'll try and form another political party. Is that realistic with less than a year to go before the next election?
Forming a political party is difficult at the best of times. The problem is I think there's going to be too many political parties, and there's not a lot of runway for somebody to get established. So, I think about my own tracking graphs, and I remember, when the Wild Rose Party sort of popped up, and it would just sort of float down there in the single digits. And then Danielle Smith became the leader of that party. And that's what it's going to take. I mean, we can't just put a new party together. You got to put a new party together, and you've got to have that amazingly strong leader that just makes people sit up and pay attention. Without that kind of lightning bolt moment where a really strong leader comes in, no, it's really hard to establish a party and win seats in a short period of time.
And guess what? It's 6:15.
Yeah.
It's 6:15.
And there's no results, and there's not even a change on their live stream page.
Now, Rachel Emanuel, our Alberta bureau chief, is telling us that she's being brought up in about 3 minutes from now. But if this was happening in 3 minutes, it probably would have been brought up a few minutes ago. But I think it's a sign that
maybe the end is in sight.
The end is nigh. The end is nigh. One way or another, we're going to get bloody results here. As long as we get them before the game, for God's sakes. No one, win, lose, or draw, no one will forgive Jason Kenney if this runs into the game.
Janet, Flames or Oilers?
Oh, well, I'm here in Calgary. I gotta say Flames, but I have even less. I have even less insight in who's going to win this hockey game than I have in what's going to happen with this leadership.
Yet you gave us a straight answer.
Yes, thank you. I know you've asked me a lot of questions today, and that's the first straight answer I've given you.
All right. Well, thank you very much for coming in both times tonight, Janet. I know you've got a busy night and you've got to go chat with those other people over there. So we appreciate your insight and your thoughts.
I don't know your availability. We asked for you to come back at this time, naively expecting the results by now. So we don't know your availability, but if there's any chance you're able to pop back, I'm willing to say it's likely we're going to have results in the next 10 to 20 minutes. But
okay, yeah, just message me, Corey, if you need me back.
Sure, and we'll see you in the lobby if you pop in, and we're still on the broadcast. So hey, if you want to come on in, you're welcome.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us, Janet.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Dave, what are we hearing?
My screen is blank.
Yeah, just that frozen results coming soon. You know, as I said, can they just get something right?
Couldn't organize an orgy in ancient Rome.
You know, it does look like the game's already taking place. Those at home cannot see right now, but outside the main window, we've got a whole newsroom full of staff and some of our guests, and they're standing around a TV right now, like the game's on. The Flames are about to score.
Unfortunately, they're watching us.
Yeah, so it's kind of meta right now.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I'm getting some side eye from the newsroom right now. So. You know, we were saying that, you know, if we had early results, that'd be like the jury coming back late. That means a not guilty verdict. If the results drag out long, then that's like the jury coming back right away. You're getting the chair. I've been wrong before, but this late, we're now 17 minutes after the very end of the window that they gave for the results. That indicates to me that you're wrong. It's not 55. I think he loses.
Can I change my vote?
Well, what would be your vote if you could change it?
I'll stick with 55.
I'm sticking with mine, but you know, this is like that version of, you know, what happens if a press release comes on a Friday before a long weekend?
Bad news.
You don't want
trying to bury
people to pay attention to it. Well, let's put it right before the Flames Oilers Battle of Alberta for the first time in 31 years. And just other side news, somebody commented, for a distraction, but the outdoor thing at the Saddle Dome with 5,000 people, I don't know if you guys mentioned that, it's been canceled tonight.
Oh, has it?
Yeah.
Why?
High winds. So 17th Avenue is going to have 5,000 wandering, drunken, ticked-off refugees wandering towards it.
Holy hell! We better find a bar.
So the Red Mile.
We got to get out of here. We need the results. We get to a bar
right now. Yeah. So.
Oh, geez. Okay. Well, do we have Rachel Emanuel standing by? Why don't we try to get Rachel Emanuel in right now? Okay. So Dave's going to contact Rachel Emanuel, our Alberta Legislative Bureau Chief. But before she goes in, Corey, what was your prediction? 43?
48.
48?
I was on the higher side.
Oh, yeah. You went. You sticking to that?
Yeah, I'm sticking to it.
It's close to a less than solid word I've got here. I am going to kick myself if what I've got is real, and we could have broken the Kenney results like an hour ago. I am going to kill myself.
We know the hazards of breaking.
We're not doing it. I'm just going to say I got something. And what I will say, if it was,
do you want to write it on a piece of paper? Then that way,
you guys will know.
You will know, but we won't tell anybody. Rachel's unavailable at the moment.
Well, I mean, I
Okay.
imagine that means that events are underway, though. She's probably moving around on the floor, getting ready for an announcement. I mean, we can only speculate because this party that thinks that we should be confident they can run the province can't run a leadership announcement.
You know what? I'm going to write on a clear piece of paper here, and we're going to show later. I'm really opening myself up to a bad night here, but this is what we got. We're not going to show it until we have actual results. 6:30, they say now.
Oh, you're
Oh,
kidding!
come
Hey!
Hey, it looks like they're cheering for like Calgary just got a goal in the newsroom here. Holy hell! Okay, well,
Unbelievable.
You know-
I'm getting more and more confident Kenney is not having a good night.
There's only two scenarios I see in this. One again is like I
Say
said,
that.
they lost and they're trying to figure out how to polish the turd, or scrutineers are battling and there's, we've been through that in counts, internal party races, and that it's that close that they're all fighting over, oh, that mark went outside the box and I don't agree with how that envelope was opened, and that sort of petty garbage. But I mean, they've had all day.
Damn.
They did all the verifications. They could have started counting, and here we go. They're pushing it and pushing it and pushing it. I mean,
This is starting to remind me of the good old days of the Tory leadership.
Oh my God!
Was that a 12-hour broadcast?
Well,
that
the
day?
time Aaron O'Toole was elected federal conservative leader.
here's a hint,
Going
UCP.
on
For every
forever.
15 minutes you put this off, you're probably giving Notley another 2% support because you look inept.
And you're helping Western Standard ratings
Well, yeah.
because, like, you guys can't go anywhere. You need to know. At least you can't go anywhere till the game starts. Please don't leave us when the game starts. I know that's going to be good. But
Well,
like, this
I
is the
know
end of the
there's-
game. You can't leave with the end of the game. That's only the beginning of the game.
There are people around here that have tickets to the game.
Well, they
So
won't be
their
here long.
their hatred is growing even more than ours.
Yeah. Is there? So there's no way for us to get Rachel in right
No, she's being walked
Midst of
about.
something, yes.
now? Okay.
So we are back to familiar territory and speculating. And
Well, Corey, run us through a couple comments here.
comments. Well, let's see. Somebody complaining about the Maverick being Federalist lights. I'm not going to quote Dan Jerome there. That's our automatic bleeping. Basically, though, I mean, they're reflecting us. There are people who have been tuning in for a couple of hours now and expecting the government for once to be competent, and we should have known better. And they're frustrated. They're tired. We've been seeing speculation back and forth. Angela saying, get Danielle back. I'm afraid Danielle had to go. Danielle was available, for when we thought the results might be released by now. I know that from what I've seen on Twitter, there's of course they're just having a heyday and a mockery for the. This is not a popular government.
Actually, let's just make sure, Nico on broadcast here. Let's make sure that the live stream we have, I'm pretty sure this will be the case. Let's make sure it's not just the results being announced. Let's make sure it's actually going to have Kenney's expected statement on the results afterwards. I'd be surprised if they didn't make those two things the same. But let's just make sure.
But here's a question from Blaze Bomer. He's been kind of critical online.
But he's former senior member of Kenney's staff. Not anymore.
Not a big Kenney fan now. And he put a joking tweet out a while back saying, did the leader demand a recount? And now he's saying, this doesn't seem so ridiculous right now. Are we so close that we're in recount territory? But again, if you're so close to 50%, you're in recount territory, resign.
Well, at that point, you still do want the accurate result because, I mean, it's slightly more face-saving to, you got 51 and you say, for the good of the party, I'm resigning. I don't think he would do that.
Yeah.
But I think, if at 51, you obviously can't remain the leader of 51. No one can do that. But he, it's probably better for Legacy to resign at 51 rather than be removed at 49.
Yeah.
As my old colleague Rob Ferguson says on Twitter, perhaps they're saving it for the first intermission.
Don't joke like that, Dave. Don't joke.
There'll be lynch mobs, but I just keep driving that home and rubbing it in. I mean, it's not just Kenney's popularity; it's the problem. It's the whole party, and every opportunity they have, they seem to be going out of their way to piss Albertans off. Even tonight, I mean, if we got a new leader on the way, they're already getting a soured well to start with.
Even Rick Bell, UCP really does have this uncanny ability to piss people off. And
That's what they do.
it's not just us complaining. Go on Twitter. It is just they're being pilloried left, right, and center. It's utterly ridiculous. Somebody says we're not on MST, we're on Kenney
Kenney
Standard Time.
KST, yeah.
Well, this might be the end of Kenny's Standard Time at the way things are going at this rate. And, you know, it's also, I remember this from way back organizing a Wild Rose AGM once. And we had too small a media room and we didn't provide them good enough sandwiches. Media are petty, crabby people. And, you know,
I don't expect sandwiches, but I mean, I'm not above giving you a better story if you give me sandwiches,
the
though.
reality is you shouldn't be in there shining their shoes. But don't provoke media, particularly when they already don't like you that much.
Just some basic
Don't
professionalism.
Make it worse. You're not
Show
helping
up on time.
Yes, because it's just they don't do themselves any favors.
We've got an Italian in the office, and Italians, you know, they're not so punctual.
Ah.
And you know, I don't like that. I like punctuality.
Well, you understand me. How many times have you seen me late here? I mean, you've seen me slacking off.
But you're not Italian.
You've seen me destroy the office bathroom. I've done all sorts of untoward things here at the Western Standard offices, but I am never late. Never late.
No, you're on time, even if you don't do anything.
Even if you'd rather I wasn't here.
Yeah. I mean, it's just basic professionalism. But I mean, this is nothing new. This is just the way the UCP under Kenney works.
Apparently, from Emma Graney, a Globe and Mail columnist who's at Spruce Meadows, she's saying she's at Spruce Meadows. Apparently, they have a peppy band playing Western jazz. So the party at Kenney's still seems to be going.
You think we're invited?
Well, Rachel is.
Rachel's there.
Only because she went to Washington.
Yeah.
Rick Bell just tweeted, "It's official. The delay is no longer funny." No, I mean, there's the reality. There's a lot of people who are just getting upset and crabby now. You know,
well, we're going to have Mike Solberg joining us in a minute here from New West Public Affairs. You know, he's been supportive of the Premier. I say this without trying to be a jerk, as difficult as that is. You know, we've had a difficult time getting defenders of the Premier on. There are defenders of the Premier, but there's just not a lot of them.
I reached out. I honestly did as I was setting up this guest list for a week, and there are some where defenders just don't want to come on.
Most of them don't have the guts to do it. And you know, I know it's not the most popular thing to be defending. I think we've got them. You want to scroll down? I think we're going to bring Mike Solberg.
Okay, yeah. And see that commenter, Jane Morgan. Yeah, see, this is the trouble I'm getting in. I was supposed to be going to a movie with Jane tonight. Yeah, Jane, I might be a little late.
Don't hate him, Jane. Don't hate him.
Jane, I'm going to feed him. Don't worry.
Oh, she's not worried about how I get fed.
No.
All right, let's bring Michael in. So, Mike Solberg.
We got Mike Solberg here.
How are you doing?
Good. Reporting for duty. Just got off with the state broadcaster, but happy to be back.
Oh, well, good to see our tax dollars well spent.
Yeah. Mike, we're it's like okay. Oh, I just got a text from someone who says everyone we have is anti-Kenney, and then they saw you. Yeah, no, actually, no, I appreciate it. You know, it takes some guts. You know, Corey has a daily show, and it has actually been difficult getting supporters of the Premier on. You know, his critics have been fairly outspoken, but I think it's fair to say his defenders have been less outspoken. So it takes some guts. So I really appreciate you coming on. What we were saying kind of early on, right when we started at 3:45. We were saying if the results are early, you know, that's like the jury taking a week to decide. It means you're probably innocent. That it's going to be good for Kenney. It's good news. They want to get it out, hit the news cycle, hit the 6 o'clock news. But if it's a late announcement towards the later half of 6 o'clock, then that's like the jury coming back after 5 minutes, probably ready to hang you. We are now, it was a window of 4 to 6 o'clock. We're now at 6:30. Do you read anything into that? Do you think this is not a good sign for the Premier?
You know, I would normally put some stock into that, but you know, this government, I think all governments, well, I should call it party. I should actually clarify. It's a party process. I think I predicted that it would be late anyways. I have no idea what's going into actually getting this result ready to present to the public, but I'm not sure I would read too much into it either way at this point. I think it's likely logistical, but who knows? But I'm sure people are unhappy, just as I am, is that we're still waiting. I find it curious as well that it was set up in such a way, the ballots were counted so late in the day, that they're missing the regular news cycle as well. I think it would probably be to their advantage to try and capture some of that 4 p.m. news cycle, the deadlines of certain journalists, and try and get some news coverage prior to the Battle of Alberta, which is going to happen in an hour here.
We are really worried about, as wonderful as, I would say as wonderful as I look. Here's someone else. Okay. This is, I think we know your prediction. Do you stand by your prediction that you think the Premier comes out on top?
Yeah, I do. One thing I did do a couple of days ago was tweet my prediction on the actual vote percentage. I wanted to keep it up for posterity. A number of Twitter followers and others joined in the fun. I said 68%. At this point, I think that's probably ludicrous. I think it's going to be much lower. But I do think he's going to stay on. I think it'll be a net positive 51% or more support reaffirming as leader of the party. I do.
Okay. Well, if it around 6:30, we're now 6:30.
It's not coming at 6:30.
Well, an issue that the party's had a lot too, or at least is clear, concise communication. If you don't have the results, I saw somebody else saying, why don't you blame Deloitte? Well, because Deloitte is working for the party. I want to hear from the boss. Like, communicate it. Say there's an issue. Why hasn't somebody gone to a microphone and said, we've had a delay in counting. We've had a discrepancy. We want to iron something out. Like, when you leave us all here in silence, that just feeds speculation. That speculation is usually not going to be in the party's favor.
Yeah, for sure. And Deloitte would have been an easy scapegoat. Obviously, to your point, Corey, they are working on the behalf of the party, and without knowing, without being behind that partition and behind the kind of closed doors of this process, I have no clue. But I'm frustrated along with everyone else. But I'm sure we'll find out soon. I would never speculate that the Premier has anything to do with this. I think it's lifted out of his hands. But there's obviously an issue, and it's a frustrating one.
Well, I don't know. I think it's within the realm of possibility that the results are known right now. Because Deloitte is not, unless I'm mistaken, I don't believe Deloitte is announcing the results. Rick Orman, the chief returning officer, is announcing it. So the counting, the actual results, is in the hands of Deloitte. Announcing the results is in the hands of the party, and I don't think it's a stretch to think that if it was a less than enthusiastic result for the... Oh, here we go.
Oh, here we go.
President of the United Conservative Party of Alberta.
Let's bring up the volume,
and the
Nico.
chair of this special general meeting.
We can't hear
I want to thank all of you for tuning in today to this live
Nico, we
stream
can't hear.
and the continuation of our 2022 United Conservative Association special general meeting. As I mentioned when we gathered in April, this meeting is being held according to the rules and procedures established by the elected board of directors pursuant to Article 13.1 of our United Conservative Association bylaw. Those rules set out the agenda for the meeting, and there will be no amendments to the agenda. The only item of business today that remains to be carried out is the announcement of the leadership review results. This has been an extraordinary effort on behalf of the members of our party. I would suggest that no process in Alberta's history has had more discussion, more input, or more scrutiny than this review of our leader. There has been much conversation about the integrity of this process. Our members, and in fact Albertans, wanted us to have a credible process, and we delivered. We are bringing civility back to the political process. Before we get to the results, it's important to talk about what was involved. Tens of thousands of Albertans signed up to take part. Our UCP membership more than doubled. The mail-in ballot allowed every eligible member to choose to have their say. Members were given the opportunity to make sure that their information was accurate. We had an internal process to ensure that all membership applications received met the requirements outlined in our bylaws, which were created by our UCP members at a general meeting. Ballots were sent from a third-party mailing house to all those eligible. We worked with Canada Post from the beginning to ensure their timely delivery. Our party staff spent thousands of hours responding to calls and emails assisting our members. Videos were posted on our website explaining the process in detail. We were open and transparent and answered all queries from our membership and the media. We sat down with some of our harshest critics and shared information to address their concerns. As a result, record numbers of our members have participated in this leadership review, more than any other party in Canada. The engagement of our members has been extraordinary. Thank you to everyone who participated. It's through your commitment that we have such a strong process. The UCP, along with our amazing, incredibly engaged volunteers, has worked diligently to maintain the security of this vote. Each ballot package was received in Deloitte's secure facility. ID was verified and checked against our membership list. We can attest that only one ballot per eligible member was counted. The ballots have been kept in secure sealed ballot boxes until the count today. Both the verification process and the count were observed by our many constituency association scrutineers, returning officers, and Deloitte. Over 14,000 Albertans tuned into our live stream to observe the process. I would like to thank Doreen Hume and her team from Deloitte LLP for stepping forward to advise us and be an independent observer of our processes. Deloitte was appointed to monitor the mail-in voting process and verify the leadership review results. They have done a tremendous job. Our Chief Returning Officer, Rick Orman, and his Deputy Returning Officers worked every step of the way to ensure a secure process. Thank you to them for their wisdom, experience, and civility. Over 200 party volunteers gave of their time to carry out the ID verification and the count. Scrutineers from constituencies across the province and from both sides of this issue were in the room at all times to observe. We couldn't have done it without these remarkable folks. Thank you to all. Whatever the results, we need to focus on being the united Conservative Party. Tomorrow is the start of the 2023 election campaign. We have a lot of work to do, and we need to do that together as a team. I will now ask Rick Orman, our Chief Returning Officer, to give you the results.
Thank you, Cynthia. Good evening, everybody. Our party's leadership review and selection rules set out that the question in a leadership review shall be, quote, do you approve of the current leader, unquote. Members were given the option to vote yes or no. Those same rules require we announce the number of votes cast for and against the question, as well as the total numbers for the vote. So here are those numbers. I can advise that there were 34,298 votes cast. There were 17,638 yes votes and 16,660 no votes. These numbers represent 51.4% yes and 48.6% no.
Thank you, Rick. Because the leader received more than 50% of the votes cast in support of his leadership, a leadership election will not be automatically triggered by the leadership review vote. That completes our business for today. Thank you again for attending. I now declare the 2022 United Conservative Association Special General Meeting officially adjourned. Before we hear from Premier Kenney, I'd like to speak about our leaders' commitment to the leadership review process. Over the last several weeks, Premier Kenney has crisscrossed the province to meet with many of our nearly 60,000 members. Since January, he has done more than 100 events, telephone town halls, coffee meetings, fundraisers, and phone calls with members from as far north as Lacrete all the way down to Medicine Hat. At every turn, he has reinforced the vision upon which our party was founded, a broad-based, mainstream political party where Conservatives of all persuasions can come together to build a stronger movement and a better province. He has seen this leadership review process as an opportunity to reinvigorate our party and to assert how UCP policies have helped create the huge momentum we are seeing in Alberta today. I'm confident we will ride that momentum into the next election, where Albertans will reward us for a job well done and once again put the trust in our party. And now I'd like to go to Calgary, where we will hear from our leader, Jason Kenney.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here, and to thousands of folks joining us right across the province online. Friends, tonight the members of our party completed a democratic exercise in accountability. The result is not what I hoped for, or frankly what I expected. But I've been clear from day one that I will respect the decision of the members in this leadership review. And I expect all members of our party to do just that. Friends, while 51% of the vote passes the constitutional threshold of a majority, it clearly is not adequate support to continue on as leader. And that is why tonight I've informed the president of the party of my intention to step down as leader of the United Conservative Party. I'm sorry, but friends, I truly believe that we need to move forward united. We need to put the past behind us. And our members, a large number of our members, have asked for an opportunity to clear the air through a leadership election. And I've recommended, therefore, that the provincial board schedule a leadership election in a timely fashion. I want to thank all members who participated in this process and the hundreds of volunteers who have pitched in. I also want to thank so many of you here and right across the province for your support and the tireless efforts of those who have had confidence in my continued leadership. Friends, it's clear that the past 2 years were deeply divisive for our province, our party, and our caucus. But it is my fervent hope that in the months to come, we all move on past the division of COVID. And disappointing as this result is for me, I am incredibly proud of the work that this team has done. Together, we reunited the free enterprise movement in Alberta politics, and we won the largest electoral mandate in our province's history. We inherited profound fiscal and economic challenges, and then we went through 3 once-in-a-century crises, the largest public health crisis in a century, the largest collapse of the world economy in nearly a century, and the first time ever we experienced negative oil prices. And yet, despite all of that, we got the job done, delivering on nearly 90% of our election commitments while turning around our economy. While turning around the economy, so we're leading Canada in economic and job growth, balancing the budget for the first time in 14 years, and paving the path towards a new era of diversification, putting parents back in charge of education, passing the Choice in Education Act, and so much more. By the way, did you hear last week? We won an historic victory against Justin Trudeau's No More Pipelines law. And just yesterday, I was with members of our team in Washington fighting for Alberta energy jobs and winning the support of some of America's key leaders. We continue to get the job done as a team. But clearly, a large number of our members want to clear the air with a leadership election. And I fully respect their decision, and I encourage all members to do the same. While we have our internal differences, we must remember Remember the shared values that unite us as Conservatives. And we must always remember the promise of Alberta, this great land of opportunity where dreams come true and anyone can achieve their God-given potential. So thank you so much for your presence. Now, let's get on with the real show tonight, the Battle of Alberta. As Daryl Sutter said yesterday, it's bringing our province together. It's the best thing ever. I couldn't agree more. God bless you all, and God bless the province of Alberta. Thank you so much.
We've got Michael.
All right. Well, we were just witnessing history there. Jason Kenney resigning as leader of the United Conservative Party and the Premier of Alberta. He scraped by with just 51% of the vote, and an absolute nightmare scenario. A leader with 51%. No way any leader can lead a party. He had a less percentage of the vote from his own party than he got from Albertans at large last time. He surprised me. He gave every indication that he would take 50% plus one. He indicated that is the rules, and that is technically true. But he surprised me, and I think did the right thing for his party today.
He did. He did.
David, you have done more than almost anyone in the province to make tonight happen. How are you feeling?
You know what? I'm proud of Jason Kenney because he did the right thing. So thank you, sir. Shoot. It's emotional. Thank you.
Yeah. This is the conclusion of a long road for you and Take Back Alberta. They just didn't see what you guys had coming. Corey, how surprised are you by the results tonight?
Well, I mean, it was close to where I was predicting, but as I said, that was a spitball. I could have just as easily been wrong by 10%. I am, I guess, happy that, as we've said in the scenario, I'm saying it with sadness because I was enthusiastic with Kenney going in, but I'd made up my mind some time ago that he just couldn't seem to put it together and that it was time to move on. The worst possible thing we were fearful of when we heard the results announced was 51%, but he was going to stay there because then we would just have more fighting and division. To be honest, I had my mental plan as if he did come in at 70, that's where I'd come in and say, okay, maybe guys get together and make this.
Well, I would have said they're cheating.
Because, well, whatever, there's that aspect too.
Yeah.
But as it is, he said he was going to stay on with 50% plus one potentially. He didn't. He clearly was not happy. I mean, this is the end of.
That's a very hard thing. But to do the right thing in that moment, it says a lot.
So 1 second, we're gonna bring Mike Solberg back into the stream here. After we're going to go to Paul Hinman in a little bit, but first let's pull Mike Solberg back in. Mike, I'm really interested for your take here. Not the results you were hoping for tonight.
Well, hope is the wrong connotation, Derek. I mean, absolutely, I supported Jason Kenney. But I more so supported United Party, and I support the will of the membership. I'm proud of my friend David. For the work that he did. And I'm equally as proud of Jason Kenney and his campaign and ultimately his resignation. He clearly didn't have the result that he wanted and clearly not the result that I think it was remotely adequate to remain as leader of this party. It's certainly a governing party on the eve of an election. So my jaw is dropped. I'm flabbergasted. I expected a different result and I certainly didn't expect him to resign tonight. But here we are. And now the whole world will be asking what is next. I think we kind of know what's next. It'll be a leadership race. But as the dust settles, things are about to get very interesting.
This was, I suppose the scenario will play out more as if he didn't win. And I don't think anyone would consider 51% a win. But he did surprise me, and I think handled this with a bit more grace than myself and maybe some others who are critical of him. I did just look at David. He handled maybe more grace than some of us expected. Some of us expected that he would take 50% plus a single vote and would rather burn this party down than give up control. That assumption, my own assumption, was wrong. How do you think he handled tonight? You know, I think a lot of what I saw was he was trying to be magnanimous, but clearly with an eye towards his legacy. I think this is clearly why the results were delayed this long. They had the results, and he had to make a decision. You could write a stay speech and you could write a leave speech. And I guess this was the third speech. You technically get a majority, but it's not enough to stay. So he has to make that decision and probably, you know, mark up a speech and stuff. I think that explains why it was taking so long. But I think what we saw tonight was him trying to. He was being humble. I think, and that's not something we've seen from him since he was running for. That was kind of the Jason Kenney we liked when he was running for UCP leader back when the big blue truck was more of a believable routine. Do you think tonight he was trying to set legacy, or what was he trying to achieve tonight? And what did you make of his speech overall?
Yeah, no, it's short speech and brief, which I think is good. You know, what's left to say? It's all been tabled. It's all been said. What we witnessed was the end of a brilliant 30-year political career. You could see himself that the premier was emotional in his remarks, and I think anybody could understand why. This is not a result he expected, but one he's accepted. And is now stepping down for the future of the party, and is willing to accept, you know, what is, I think we all agree, is the right path forward. But certainly emotional, and I'm sorry, I'm still flabbergasted. You know, Jason Kenney, the political juggernaut that we've seen as such an important part of the conservative coalition, the conservative establishment in the country, you know, and bridging the gap and the divide between the PCs and the Wild Rose and delivering on that 2019 victory. We've seen it come to an end even before the next election. I don't think anybody predicted it would end this way, but he did it with some grace. And I think he did it for the benefit of the party. And now we move on. We have to.
So I'm not allowed to throw anything about you're right, you're wrong in your face, because I was wrong, because I said 45. So I'm technically wrong too. Wrong by methodology, correct in result. But just to, I'm only going to throw something back in your face because it's going to make an analogy. It's going to make a transition to my next analogy. You know, your case for why he is likely to survive was that he has always won. He has never lost. Therefore, he probably will never lose. It is not without a deep sense of irony that, you know, he has never come close to losing any electoral contest before, both in general elections and leaderships, nominations. The one he did lose was the membership of the party that he is the father of. It is, you know, I said something the day I left politics. Revolutions devour their young. And I think that the revolution has now devoured Kenney. And, you know, he very much helped to mainstream a lot of the grassroots populist movement, and, you know, helped to build that anger against Ottawa and channel it. And he, I think, by most measures, failed to deliver on that anger against Ottawa. And so that anger came back to bite him. And he would use strong language against things like vaccine passports and lockdowns. And then he would do it himself. And so I think there is a real pattern of him jumping on a populist wave only to fall off the surfboard and hit the rocks. And today, I think, was the end of that. Do you think that's a fair, I think, maybe summation of the kind of overall macro reasons for why he's lost the premiership now, or is it something else?
No, for sure. I think you hit it, Derek. You know, Premier himself would, I think, admit to some of these missteps, and I'll certainly take it even a step further. You know, regardless of what you think about these issues, taking one stance and then doing the exact opposite, and, you know, the weeks to follow, doesn't sit well with any membership, particularly one that's so grassroots driven and conservative as obviously the United Conservative Party. And they lost faith in him over a slow period of time. I think beginning with COVID, which, to be clear, heavy is the head that wears the crown. Nobody would relish governing during this past period. Every government, every province of this country has had enormous challenges with their population and popularity over their handling of COVID, and Kenney more so than I think perhaps anyone.
Well, I think the big difference between Kenney and the other premiers is he was dealing with Albertans.
Yeah.
And Albertans are fundamentally different. And he kept on pointing out, hey, our lockdowns have been shorter than others. We got rid of vaccine passports before other provinces. The problem is Alberta is a very different province. It has a fundamentally different political culture.
Yeah.
So we're going to come back to you, Mike, and David. But I want to bring in Rachel Emanuel, our Alberta legislative reporter and Edmonton bureau chief. She is on the ground at Spruce Meadows, where Jason Kenney has just announced his resignation. Can we bring in Rachel right now? Rachel, thank you for joining us. What's it like there right now?
It's pretty crazy. Everyone is super surprised. I'm not sure anyone really knows what to make of the situation right now. As soon as they announced the results, the crowd started cheering. Everyone was very excited. And then the premier came out and he immediately says, it's not the results that I was hoping for, which caught my attention because, of course, this entire time he's been saying 50% plus one is a mandate for me to continue. So everyone assumed he was going to stay on as long as he had over 50%. And then he continues on to say, it's not a mandate. It's not enough for me to stay on. The members have made it clear that they want a leadership review, and it's time to put the division behind us and unite. And he announced that he was resigning, and everyone in the crowd just gasped. No one could really believe it. I just spoke with a couple of his staffers. They didn't even know that this was coming. So everyone's pretty surprised. No one really knows what to make of things. No one has really any answers right now at all.
Have you managed to speak with any of your staff? Because I know it's a fairly hand-picked crowd they have there tonight. It's not open to general admission from the membership or the public. It's hand-picked Kenney people. Have you managed to speak with anyone on the ground?
Yeah, I was just speaking with his press secretary, and again, people are just pretty confused. No one saw this coming, and no one has any answers about what's happening next. So I'm not sure who all knew that this decision that Kenney was going to be resigning just now. But even as early as yesterday, he said, if I get 50% plus one, I'm going to continue. So I would just be curious to know what changed in the last day. If he just thought about it more, if he made a last minute decision to resign. I'm not really sure what happened there, and it seems like his staff don't have any answers either.
Yeah, I think I'll get your feedback, Corey. He's been saying 50% plus one is a mandate. I mean, if I was a press secretary to a premier or a leader of any political party, I would set the bar there. Because if you set the bar at something reasonable like 75%, because you really can't stay leader of a party without 75%. But you got 74. I mean, if I was a leader and I got 74, I'd say, screw it. I'm going to hack through. I'm going to try and survive. So you don't really want to start setting, playing that expectations game. That's bitten many leaders in the butt in the past. So setting the bar at 50% plus one, I think, makes sense rhetorically. The difference is most of us seem to believe it, that he would try.
Well, I mean, they really pulled out all the stops, everything they could, partisan-wise, leadership-wise, to try and make sure they won this. So it did seem that this was a person determined to cling with the fingernails right to the bitter end. But again, as you said, you have to say that. You can't set a number for yourself. So when he was saying 50% plus one, I imagine there was a number in his own head that he'd set for himself. And obviously it didn't reach that number tonight. And he decided. But, it took so long for that announcement, too. I think he had to do some soul searching. I don't think it was an instant decision. And, personally, I think that's why it was delayed. They knew it. So what are we going to do? What am I going to do? And he made up his mind and said, okay, let's go. That's where we're at.
David, 51% was the nightmare scenario.
Yeah,
where
it was.
I mean, he is technically.
It felt pretty devastating in the moment. It was like, how? But I will say, he is a great campaigner, and you know what? He overestimated. I underestimated him. Right? I was at him at 38. We got 13 above that.
Yeah. So he, we'll kind of come back to something said much earlier in the program, but I think when people join us since. Back at the UCP AGM in November, there were roughly a half dozen people who challenged. There were anti-Kenney people challenging for spots on the party's executive. They were all beat back. The Kenney campaign, the Kenney team, there was no campaign at the time, but his team around him believed that, that was the anti-Kenney forces. This is a paper tiger. Don't worry about them. And they kind of ignored it. And in the meantime, you would take back Alberta, and then separately, but really, working with, there's the Brian Jean guys. You guys were mobilizing an army.
Well, yeah, and honestly, the biggest thing...
They didn't seem to see it coming until about a week before they completely changed the rules, got rid of the Red Deer vote, and went to a mail-in vote in all of this. Do you think that if they had taken the threat of Take Back Alberta and the other groups around you guys more seriously, that Kenney could have survived this?
I think ultimately the premier, or the former premier, I guess now.
He
Hasn't resigned as premier, but I guess ultimately I think the big mistake was not sticking with his base when he needed to and losing their trust, right? And so even if they had campaigned hard, people were very disappointed in his performance, particularly around the vaccine mandates. So I think if he hadn't said there'll be no vaccine passports, and then there were vaccine passports, I don't think we would have had the anger. I think he would have been able to get through this. That was I think that was the fatal flaw, to be honest.
Okay, well, we're going to bring Janet Brown in. Janet Brown is, I think everyone, in a moment. So we're going to bring Janet Brown in a moment, I'm told. Actually, very, very quickly, we're going to go to Paul Hinman. Paul Hinman is the leader of the Wild Rose Independence Party. He was the first leader of the original Wild Rose Party of Alberta, succeeded by Danielle Smith. And wow, this is really just one very incestuous group of people all involved in politics here. Corey was involved way back then.
I can think of better ways to put it.
Corey, you have nothing to say to me about keeping it clean. Paul, I imagine you're probably happy in one sense to see Jason Kenney gone tonight. But in a sense, I have to ask if you're disappointed in just a purely pragmatic political sense as the leader of opposing political party. Jason Kenney was a source of great discontent for people who are both conservatives, libertarians, autonomists, sovereigntists, the kind of people attracted to the Wild Rose Independence Party. You've got to be feeling tonight that you've lost your greatest weapon for attracting people to your party. Oh, sorry, I can't hear Paul. Sorry, we can't hear you, Paul. I don't know.
There we go. Now it should be there. We got it.
Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
Okay. Well, first, he also lost the constitutionalists. And you have to realize, how long ago did he say, that I'm going to get a new base? He walked away from the conservatives who were supporting him. I like Corey. I actually thought, 3 years ago, I'd never be in politics again. We had somebody who got it, was going to be servant the leadership, was going to keep the conservative values. And he betrayed us. He didn't. He started chasing polls. He looked and he flip-flopped, and he didn't do those things that he needed to do. And again, he wasn't approachable. And so all those things happened. But I'm grateful that he's stepped down for the good of Alberta. To me, it's always about the province and the good of the province first. And he's done the right thing. I'm grateful for the time and the effort that he put in. And as has been mentioned, being a leader through COVID couldn't be a worse scenario than to say, I want to be there, but yet he flip-flopped. And again, he didn't stay true to the principles and the Constitution that makes our province great and our future great. And those things all undermined, I think, his leadership. And ultimately, I'm grateful he did the right thing and stepped down. But yes, it's always, saying better the devil than what's not there. But it's up to the UCP now to see whether they're going to pick somebody that's more to the left and wanted to go with the lockdowns. We have a very divided caucus, and it'll be very interesting to see rural versus city again on where they go. But really what Albertans need is a government that's going to stand up to Ottawa. Ottawa's policies are disastrous to our future. They want to destroy Alberta, and I haven't seen anybody in the UCP party who's actually going to stand up and stop Ottawa's intrusion and say no. They went around, they listened to Albertans, but they've done nothing in years since
Yeah, Paul. So I remember, I wasn't a member of the Wild Rose at the time, but I would say it's safe to say I was Wild Rose adjacent while Alison Redford was the premier. I was very much looking forward to a Wild Rose victory at that time with Danielle Smith as the leader of the party. You were a key member of the party at that time as well. And I remember, she was under a lot of fire, and we kind of thought to ourselves, my God, we have to save her. As terrible as Alison Redford, we believe she was, we saw her as our meal ticket to defeat the Progressive Conservatives and have a Wild Rose government. I have to believe it's not much of a stretch to think that both you and Rachel Notley, the one thing you have in common is that you're the two people in Alberta who really dislike Jason Kenney as premier, but don't want him to resign, because he was the meal ticket, I think, for the Wild Rose Independence Party, attracting disaffected people, and potentially, if the nightmare scenario for the UCP played out today, 51% and Kenney stayed. I think it's not terribly beyond the pale to think that you'd probably have a couple of MLAs showing up on your door in the morning looking to join. Do you think this is politically? I know you believe it's a good thing for Alberta. You've made that clear. But do you think this is potentially a setback for your party?
Absolutely. I mean, as you've mentioned, the animosity towards him and the fact that there would have been dissident MLAs had he stayed on tonight would accelerate that. And again, this is always the problem in dysfunctional, toxic relationships. They say, "Oh, I'm sorry," or they do this. And so now many Albertans are going to run back to the UCP party saying, "Oh, we've got a leadership review." And you get that honeymoon effect. And so, yes, this idea that we're going to give him another chance is there. But again, I'm going to go back and say the most important thing is who's making the decisions for Alberta. Are we going to have federalists that let Ottawa decide? Or are we going to vote for someone like myself and the Wild Rose who's going to stand up and have a mandate to say no to Ottawa and all their destructive policies? And so that will still be the same ballot question. But yes, they're going to get a honeymoon because they're having a leadership race, which isn't going to serve Albertans' best interest, I don't think.
So I got one last question for you before we go back to Janet Brown. And forgive me if I've got my history wrong here, because this is going back a ways. So the last time you were the leader of a Wild Rose party, if I'm not mistaken, when Ted Morton was running for the leadership of the Progressive Conservatives the first time, not the second, but the first time, and you were an Alberta Alliance MLA, predating even the Wild Rose, you really are the godfather of Alberta's insurgent right. You and I say insurgent in the most positive way possible. If I'm not, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that you did tell the members of the Alberta Alliance at the time that Ted Morton is fundamentally different. He represents a total change of the Progressive Conservatives, and that you did encourage members of the Alberta Alliance, precursor to the original Wild Rose at the time, to vote for Ted Morton because he was that different, and you could see yourself becoming a part of the party if it had a leader like him. I'm not asking you to identify any candidate.
The only thing that you're wrong there is that I always told Ted that if he was successful, that the most important thing he needed was a conservative opposition. And he says, "Well, Paul, the first thing I'm going to do is call you in the morning to join." It says, "No, Ted, you're going to need a conservative opposition." That's when a conservative government does best. But again, I absolutely told our members back then, buy a membership, vote for Ted Morton. This is the person we need as the premier. And again, for me, it's always what's the right thing to do.
That again, and forget the current candidates who are on offer. I know there's Brian Jean and Danielle Smith, and there'll be a bunch of others. Forget any of the individuals. But if that kind of figure emerged again, someone who shared your values, they were really conservative, really libertarian, perhaps even supported independence for Alberta. Even could you see yourself encouraging your party members of the Wild Rose Independence Party, to join the UCP just to vote for that candidate?
Not this time. The problem, and you said that last one, if they're an independence, that they won't stay part of the UCP, I don't believe. Those people that are running in there are all federalists. They also are climate alarmists. They all want to meet the Paris Accord. Carbon net zero is wrong. We can't be part of Paris. We can't be part of a Canada that wants to meet carbon net zero. We have to take a different route, and we have to be able to stand up for our resources, our future, and the taxation and the debt that's federally is just unsurmountable, and we need to be out on our own. And that's what the Wild Rose Independence Party is about. It's about standing up and protecting Alberta and our future. And I just don't see that happening in the UCP party. And again, anybody who wants to be there, it'd be interesting to see, but I don't see that happening, Derek.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. Always a pleasure as usual, Paul. Have a good evening, and
let's go cheer on some Alberta teams here for a victory.
Oh, you're being such a politician. Tell us which one.
Oh, I have to confess, I was born in Edmonton, went to U of A, was up there with Gretzky and all of that. So sorry, Western Standards in Calgary, but I'm an Oiler.
Wow, that's really going to help you get elected and back down to your hometown of Tabor. Oh boy. Okay. Well, you never. Paul might not be the most pragmatic man, but he never lies. He is he is one of the rare honest ones.
It's true.
Even when it's probably not a good idea to be. Okay.
I have to agree.
Thank you very much, Paul. God bless.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we're going to go to bring back Janet Brown, who has very generously agreed to give us her time again. Janet, many of you will know, is the leading pollster in Alberta. Wow. No more speculation, no more wild speculation. We have wild reality, Janet. I'm not even going to ask a question. Just talk.
You know, you asked me about the Flames versus Oilers. You just asked Paul Hinman. But you know what? You're asking the right question. It's Calgary versus Edmonton, right? So everything has changed today. But what hasn't changed is the electoral map. The NDP has got Edmonton wrapped up. Rural Alberta outside of the two major cities, they're going to be looking for the right conservative choice for them to vote for. The next election is going to be determined by voters in Calgary. So that's just kind of what I'm thinking now is like Calgary is going to become sort of, so fundamental. And, we're such a divided province. I'm always asked to do interviews outside of Alberta, and people don't understand how diverse this province is. People in Ontario call me all the time. Oh, you live in Edmonton. No, actually, I live in Calgary. And they're like, same difference, right? They think Calgary and Edmonton are Kitchener and Waterloo, but they could not be more different. And our very complicated political map just got so much more complicated. And, our divisions in hockey is just the tip of the iceberg.
Well, the hockey analogy, I think, sort of holds, but there's no team for everyone else in Alberta. I always find it funny in polls. I'm not sure if you do it, but a lot of polls just say Edmonton, Calgary, rural, and rural includes Red Deer and Medicine Hat and
Lethbridge.
It includes a lot of things in small towns. I think a lot of the ones I like to say everyone else, and then there might be regional breakdowns, north, south, central, that kind of thing.
And it really, from a technical point of view, Derek, it really comes down to just how big a sample you do, because, if you talk to 900, 1,000 people, it's hard to get statistically relevant data outside the two big cities. Sometimes I make the mistake of saying that's rural. Really, it's other, because as I said, Calgary and Edmonton are so different. And then we have this huge rest of the province that is so different. And so, I get, like, I moved from Ontario 22 years ago. I was the consummate downtown Toronto party girl. My friends couldn't believe I was coming to Alberta, but I just said, it is just so fascinating out there. And here I am, just like, my jaw dropped, right? Like, I believe the premier when he said 50.1 was enough. So my jaw dropped when he resigned.
Yeah. Now, I think, you're the pollster, so I know I don't have quite the moral authority on these issues as you, but I do pride myself on having probably a better insight than most people in media into understanding Alberta conservatives, particularly rural conservatives, populists, that movement. And you have said that, yes, the battle of Edmonton versus Calgary is still there, but in my view, what has changed overnight, and you probably heard me into this somewhat with Paul Hinman, is that the serious risk, likely, of a major breakaway with something Wild Rose style is, while it's not impossible, it now becomes much less likely. Okay, we're not likely to see 12 MLAs bolt, join maybe some rebranded Wild Rose party and lead some kind of insurrection there. That, while it's technically, because nothing changes, I think that is a big story. I maybe want you to weigh in on this, that the fact that nothing is going to change, I think, is one of the big stories for the electoral map, that we're unlikely to see that kind of big revolt that I expected tonight if Kenney stuck around.
Well, one of the things I was saying in the lead up to this vote is actually if he steps down, that's the least chaotic outcome of all of the outcomes. So as shocking as all of this is, nobody's going to be kicked out of caucus tomorrow, and probably nobody's going to resign. And everyone just got to wait and see who wins the leadership race. Maybe the new leader won't be acceptable to some of these dissident MLAs. Maybe a new leader will be perfectly suitable to the dissident MLAs, but not liked by another group of MLAs who are perfectly content with Jason Kenney. So funny enough, I think tomorrow's caucus meeting is going to be a lot more civil because Kenney has stepped down than it would have been if he got 51.4% and hung on and wagged his fingers and said, democracy is spoken, fall in line.
Yeah, so we're moving into essentially what's going to be a snap leadership election, and we've got the clock ticking on a general election coming next May. The parties, I mean, for the sake of democracy, going to have to leave the door open for a number of names and potential contenders come in and get in. But at the same time, they can't hesitate on this either. Like they've got to get somebody on the ground to try and win back Albertans. That's going to be tough.
Well, it particularly because the leader of the opposition is Rachel Notley. And, whether you like her or not, she's very popular within her base, right? She had a leadership review not long ago and got something like, 95, 97%. So Rachel Notley has got the left and a big part of the center locked up. She's probably very close to her ceiling in terms of vote, but this is why the UCP must get themselves organized if they have any chance of winning the next election, because, unlike elections of the past, this UCP is looking at a very strong and united NDP.
Great. All right. Well, Janet, thank you very much for joining us tonight. You've been extremely generous with your time. I think joining us 3 times, if I'm not mistaken. So
I lost count.
Everyone
was fun.
Yeah, we owe you a beer. Thank you very much for joining us, and God bless.
Thank you.
Well, and thank all of you for joining us. We're not going to abuse your time. We are up against, as great as I think we are, we're not. This battle of Alberta is over. There'll be another battle of Alberta starting as we fight to see who the next leader of the UCP and premier is. But tonight, you all want to watch the Flames versus the Oilers. So thank you all very much for joining. If you're not yet a member of the Western Standard, go to westernstandard.news. Become a member for only $10 a month or $99 a year to get unlimited access to bailout-free independent Western media. We also want to thank our sponsor, the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. I've been a member of the CSSA for well over a decade. These guys kick ass, defending your right to own, use, and purchase firearms in Canada safely and responsibly. These are people who, we'd probably have next to no guns left for law-abiding gun owners in Canada. You need to become a member. Support what they do. They are your voice as gun owners. Corey, what's their website?
CSSA-CILA.org. But it's easier just to Google them.
That's it. Every time I say it, I still don't remember it. Check them out. I support them. Western Standard supports them. They support the Western Standard. You should support the Canadian Shooting Sports Association as well. Thank you all very much. Love you all. God bless. Go Flames, go.